right, how do I sound? All right, how do I sound? Perfect. All right, guys. We excited? Yeah, we can start dragging people in. Can we? Welcome, welcome.
Yo, yo. What's going on, everybody?
Hello.
Let's do it live.
Fuck it, we'll do it live.
We're already here. We're already live to our fantastic audience. Thank you all for taking the time to show up.
Not a problem.
All right, we'll give it a few more minutes. We got most everybody. I know that Free is having some issues because great timing, massive storms right now. So knocking out the internet.
Wonder if he's getting the ones that just came through here.
I think that's what it is.
Like storms nationwide kind of thing, isn't it?
There's a massive system that's moved through the Midwest today. Hell, I think it went all the way down into the South too. It's like pummeling parts of, I think it's Alabama right now, and it's in Ohio right now. So, of course, Lactoid's getting snow, so could be better or could be worse.
Yeah, no. If my internet goes out, this might be a short show, so we'll see. We'll see how the premiere goes here, guys. I hope that doesn't happen.
I'm sitting here going, oh hey, it was 60 degrees yesterday. It's 55 today. Tomorrow it's 32.
Yeah,
It's gonna be
that's
great.
Kind of Texas weather. It's like you don't like the weather, wait 20 minutes.
I didn't know Texas was that bad. I heard it used to be pretty stable, but
I mean, I can't remember it ever being stable except for just being ungodly hot during the summer, which
right.
I heard it gets really icy during the winter.
I think it just
But
depends where you're at. If you're like in North Texas, that's true, but like I'm in like South Texas, and it's like just a slush.
all right, so the good part or the bad part?
All of South Texas is the best part. What are you talking about? The best foods.
I don't know, dude. I like Houston, but San Antonio can rot in hell.
Oh, San Antonio is much better than Houston. I live in San Antonio. I lived in both cities.
There it is. There it is.
I lived in both cities. I'll be honest, I'd probably be more biased towards Houston out of the two.
Mm-hmm.
But San Antonio has grown on me quite a bit. I tell you what, towns I can't stand is Austin.
I was gonna say I'm memeing here a little bit. If there's anywhere that like I'm gonna like shit on in Texas, it's Austin
And Dallas. Yeah, add Dallas in there.
I actually like DFW quite a lot, but that's me.
It's just overpriced. It's the real thing.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I need to make coffee.
It's kind of the mecca right now. Like Houston and DFW are growing at like
they're
stupid
exploding.
levels.
Yeah, Houston's already almost out to College Station.
All right. So the last one we're waiting on, he's our friend who is currently in the middle of electrical blackouts and internet blackouts. So he's bravely trying to make it. So we'll just give him a few more minutes. He might not have video, but given the circumstances, I think I can make an exception. Apparently, they're under a tornado warning. So.
Oh, okay, cool.
Go get a lunch here. Go watch the tornado.
Let's see.
How you doing,
Yeah, I'm in Texas. That happens a lot down here.
Yeah, but not in this time of year.
This is the winter, I guess. I don't really know anything.
No, yeah, this time of year. Yes. Well, I mean, it's almost spring. Spring is arriving earlier in Texas than it used to, so normally we wouldn't get it in February, but we would get them in March historically.
Right.
And we're close enough to March.
We
had more wind power in January. We had as much wind power occurring in January this year as we normally get in April. So that tells you how things are changing down here.
There is no active tornado warnings in effect right now.
No, not in Texas, in Alabama.
No.
Yeah,
we're fine today.
Not in the country. Everything's expired effectively 2 hours ago.
Oh wow! Well, I checked probably 2 hours ago, so that's like.
Well, and power lines go down. Like takes a while sometimes for them to go back up.
But yeah, that system that went through the Midwest is kind of broken up. But literally everything from Baton Rouge all the way to Charleston, West Virginia, is just getting hammered.
Yeah.
Apparently, there's been quite a few tornadoes today. A lot of them in Tennessee, which is, I mean, this is the time of the year when the South gets their tornadoes. But holy God, like why Tennessee? Like usually it's Mississippi and Alabama that gets nailed.
West Tennessee can get hit pretty hard.
Yeah, I mean, there was 8 active tracks. No, sorry, 10 active tracks within Tennessee today.
Damn. Yeah, someone in the chat saying that it's pretty bad in Tennessee. So
Yo, Lactoid, you trying to send me a link to the stream?
oh yeah, no, for sure. So for those of you who would like to advertise, I'm always a fan of free advertisement. You can find me at Lactoid TV on Twitch.
So are we done with the anti-communism united? Is that no longer a thing?
Yes, and you know what?
I still see it. Like that's what this says.
That's what this Discord. I'm look. I'm
Fantastic
holding out.
Discord
I'm holding out for the Discord. Okay, like
Rebranding.
Okay. So we'll stay united for a little bit longer.
Proudly not an anti-communist in the anti-communism united front.
You just need to add a socialism to that, and I'll
I was
be
gonna say-
there next to you.
I was gonna say,
Absolutely.
why are you here? What's going on here?
Look.
Did you allow degenerates in this conversation?
A couple. There's a couple lefties here.
My name is Degenerate Dialectics. So.
There's one lefty who happens to be right above me, who's pretty lefty. So we're gonna have to deal with that.
And it's not the degenerate parts that's worrying; it's the dialectic.
I don't know what's worse. They're just having to listen to lefties or having Ico try to troll me. Like it's.
Yeah. You're literally the only person I will. No, that's not true. I like to troll KOE too.
Well, fuck
But
that.
I mean, that's like that's yeah. He's
that's
He's trolling 24/7. I troll him maybe 10% of the time. But that's a lot for me.
A little bit
Fantastic beard, by the way, Papa. That's
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah.
primo.
I try. Yeah, I try. I'm still trying to master the whole.
Oh, yeah, the
there's
twist up?
there's an uncanny valley when it comes to mustaches, where they look good when they're short, and when they get to a certain length, you can get them to look good. But
Yeah, in between.
it's that in between length that gets really awkward, and that's where I am right now. My mustache isn't long enough to do the thing, like
I
the
gotcha.
twirling thing.
Yeah, mine
Yeah.
might just start doing that. So I look like I'm like
Yeah.
related. To
I mean, I
Cortez.
can't compete with like real Rat Hom or anything on the mustache game, but
You know, for a bunch of anti-communists, you guys look like a bunch of bearded Marxists, honestly. So
Mm.
I'm just a
yeah.
soulless.
Bullying begins.
I am a soulless redheaded capitalist. All right, that's how it works.
We're bringing
Sort
it
of.
back.
Sort of. He
All
needs to
right.
become an ultra-capitalist. Then he's
See,
I am an
super
ultra capitalist right here. There you go. Now you're talking.
Mm-hmm.
All right. As much as I love y'all, I have some shit to do, such as a wage cage tomorrow. So if you
The
wanna
wage
get
cage
this-
tomorrow.
and if y'all want to, kick this off anytime soon,
Yeah,
we can
fair
definitely
enough.
do
Not the Marxist language.
So,
that. Hey, I
free-
gotta play to my audience.
Absolutely. So Free is obviously having some technical difficulties. He may be joining us shortly. If he does, we'll just drag him in the room and pretend nothing happened. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and get started. We got some fun topics today. I hope you guys find them as fun as I did when I was looking into them. So welcome to the Debate Crate. This is my first show, and hopefully it's going to be amazing. Let's pray. I am your host, Lactoid, and today we're going to be talking about Chinese balloons, children, and racism, the top topics in U.S. politics currently. We're going to go ahead and start off by giving each panelist a short introduction where they can briefly introduce themselves and give their opinion as to the first topic. I'm going to go ahead and just start out by reading the first topic here. The topic that's been provided is: the U.S. has recently shot down 4 high-altitude objects within North American airspace. Several of these objects were Chinese surveillance balloons, and China claims that these balloons were benign. But regardless, is that a concern? If it is a concern, to what extent and what action should be taken? As China continues to saber rattle about Taiwan, to what extent should we tolerate Chinese incursions? Or is this just a U.S. overreaction? What should U.S. policy be regarding our airspace going forward? Let's start with Admiral Gibbs.
So my name is Admiral Gibbs. You can see me in, pretty much Admiral Gibbs on everything. I'm a variety streamer. I do a lot of games mainly. I also announce for like the HCS. So I do a Halo Draft League, HCS, and some other tournaments. Um, and I host a really big show on Wednesdays called the Wicked Wednesday Show. So check it out if you all want to see it. Now, as for the Chinese invasion of our airspace, we should basically consider our airspace sacred. We should be taking these things out, and then we should be acting with a disproportionately violent response towards the Chinese afterwards in order to handle this. We need to go there and we take the fight to them so hard that they never want to do this again. That's what we should be doing.
Thank you. DJ, go ahead. You are muted.
So I'm DGen Dialectics. I don't actually have any like streams or pages to plug. If you want to come argue with me, you'll find me in Destiny's Discord. And as for the Chinese balloon, I think we should be worried about threats and incursions into our sovereign territory. I do think that the response of shooting it down out of the sky was reasonable. And I do think we need to take a more aggressive, but very not overly aggressing into China, but really that strategic ambiguity line that we've towed with Taiwan for so long. We really need to start stepping it up and being very obvious in our attempts to bolster Taiwan and not go anywhere should they be attacked.
Perfect. Aiko.
Yeah, my name's Aiko Rich. You can find me on Twitter at this handle. I don't really do anything streaming or anything like that right now, but I am there. On the balloon thing, I mean, I think the way that we responded to the first balloon, and then the way that like our posture changed after that, really sort of tells me that there are some benefits to this happening, because now we're aware of something at least at a public level that we weren't really aware of before. One of the things that we're aware of are all of these balloon bases in the Pacific that we're now finding, and it's becoming easier for us to track them from wherever it is that they've launched and track them where they're going. We have a really good space-based satellite system. Something like this shouldn't be able to take us by surprise. One of the reasons this happened is because there were, from what I understand, there were some upgrades to radar installations that were looking at a level that we weren't looking at before, and then now we're making it standard to look at that level, and that's why we're finding balloons like left and right now that don't have anything to do with what is happening with China. In terms of what a response should be, yeah, I think it should be proportional. I think we should shoot down whatever we're supposed to shoot down, or whatever like encroaches our airspace. I think we probably should have done this one earlier. Although I understand, like in the early days of something new happening, military response was a little confused at the beginning, so I understand that. And well, I have more to say, but I'll wait for the going in and out.
All right, thank you. And Casimir, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Casimir. You can find me on Twitter at Free Casimir, where I try to maintain high quality of posts. Eventually, you'll see Substack and some videos. I write a lot currently into the table, but it'll eventually be made into content. About this, I'm completely perplexed by the analysis I'm hearing. I absolutely don't see any sovereignty up in the sky. I don't see any flags planted. I don't see anyone working the clouds and tilling them with a plow, right? I don't see anyone making borders in the skies. So this is complete nonsense. Now, is it fine to shoot down an abandoned piece of someone else's property that is floating freely beyond control, potentially interfering with air travel? To the extent that risk exists, yeah, you can, destroy it. Who does it belong to? Some Chinese guy that should declare he owns it, because their government definitely doesn't own anything. They're communists. They don't have property because they violate property. So as thieves, they don't have any rights. Okay, so that's like free real estate. Grab it while you can. In terms of saber rattling, it's really stupid. Despite them being criminals, they're nuclear-armed criminals. That means you have to speak softly, and your weaponry is going to be largely economic. And this is where this story is actually a distraction. The real story is the fact that our state corporate elite is entirely in bed with the Chinese Communist Party, and they're working together. They're bypassing our IP laws that are restricting competitors in the United States, shipping it off to China where they can copy those secrets freely, thus bypassing the whole fictional IP system that is harming our population. So that's the real story. The story is like senators sleeping with Chinese spies, corporations getting fully infiltrated, maybe a little bit of land purchase. That's a story. Some balloons that both countries seem to be sending back and forth between each other. If this was sane, if we were in a sane world, we would have like an air tunnel where once per month their spy plane would be allowed to fly across the entirety of the United States, and we would get the same access to their country, just so we know we're not on the brink of a nuclear war. Just so we have a little bit of a margin of there won't be any errors of information. So that's my take.
All right, that's definitely one of the more unique takes that I've heard on this topic. So that's going to be exciting to deal with. Tiberius, go ahead.
Well, thank you for having me. I am proud to be here for Lactoid's inaugural panel. It is great to see you, sir. I am a little ashamed and upset that you canceled the 1v1 we were supposed to have in order to have this to where I can't talk to you because you're the moderator. But nonetheless, I am here to support a good man. So, yeah, if anyone doesn't recognize me, my name is Tiberius D. I talk a lot about geopolitics and kind of the ethics of what's going on in the wider world. And yeah, this is a quick and easy one for me, although I surprise the shit out of everyone. I'm generally incredibly anti-CCP, and I'm kind of a hawk. When it comes to this particular thing, though, is that I surprise everyone. I actually upset a few people because I'm literally sitting here going, oh, that's cute, China. You discovered 1950s spy technology. That's wonderful. That's so cute. I don't give a fuck. I actually legitimately do not give a flying fuck about these spy balloons. This is literally like kindergarten level shit. I don't see this as any major threat to our national security. There's only like 2 ways you could possibly make this go sideways, and I'm not really that concerned. And if China wants to poke the bear, I mean, yeah, you can go ahead and do so, but that they do so at their own peril. But we can get into that when we get into the open. And so that is my opening statement. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Yeah, so now we're going to get into the open. If you guys have any issues with each other's openings, you can go ahead. I do have a few questions in case that doesn't happen. But yeah, so I'll just give you guys an opportunity first.
Yeah, for the sake of this conversation, you can call me Super Lactoid and just address me in the 1v1. I'll defend his honor. I'll fight for him. I'll toss you into the hole.
Thank you, Casimir. I appreciate it.
So Lactoid Light, it is a pleasure to see you again.
So responding to Tiberius's opening there was one part that you've mentioned that I've seen a couple other people mention, which is that this isn't actually a threat to national security. And then the other part is being like, oh, this is old tech, like they're not really learning anything new. It does seem like the only information that they're actually gaining from this, they would also be able to gain from any of their satellites that they have going over us at any time. So there's not really any new information gained. And they're not weaponized, so there really isn't like a military threat to our sovereignty. But regardless, the incursion into our airspace is a threat to our sovereignty. They're directly telling the United States that they don't respect your authority. They don't respect the claim that you've made to that airspace. They don't respect the idea, and then you've shot it down. They don't respect that you've done that. They're literally saying, we withhold the ability to respond with due force. And they're not budging on this one.
It seems, but that's assuming that this was done on
extending
purpose.
out into the galaxy.
Yeah, so I want to tag this since it was my original that he's kind of rebuttaling, and that is airspace is a little weird because unlike the oceans, we haven't agreed on like what is internationally accepted as like, all right, this is your freedom of navigation movement, right? This is why we have civilian airliners fly over everywhere, and we can have people interact with like civilian aviation. The problem is that, like, legalistically, like, most places don't claim over 1,000 feet as part of their dominion, except for the federal institution that is our government. Now, I'm not saying any of that's bad. I'm just saying there's a level where, like, I get where people are like, oh, they're poking the bear, they're putting their shit where it doesn't belong. If you want to shoot it down because it's like threatening civilian airliners, like the one that was over the Great Lakes, totally on board with that. Like, that's, that could cause a problem. But the part where I just go a little bit sideways with this one is that freedom of the skies is kind of weird, because I do want to make sure it's like, hey, look, if somebody's like trying to move a bomber or a fighter craft, you want to get rid of that as soon as possible. That doesn't cross over. But anything that's not weaponized, like, I feel like that's kind of a civilian thing, even if it's owned by a former, I'm sorry, another governing entity, even at one that we consider a rival. So there's a level where I totally get that the people are going to be like, well, this makes us look soft and weak. And my whole response is, we're not. We could blow the shit out of the sky in a matter of seconds. Do we need to? Is that necessary?
I don't know about
We absolutely need to. Let me jump on that. It's the precedent that's being set. And I think you understand how big of an issue that is. You can sit here and say only 1,000 feet up or whatever. It's Fugazi doesn't mean anything really. But like,
Alright.
whenever we have this balloon floating over and it's 3 buses long, it's clearly not a civilian like thing. No civilian company's putting a 3-bus long balloon over the United States, and it's coming here floating over, and it's like some kind of hole. They're like, hey, well, if we can push it this far, what can we get away with next? And they're just going to keep pushing, and they're going to keep pushing until you get a appropriate response. What happened when we had the issue in with Syria, where we had the people attacked? What did Trump do? He launched a bunch of cruise missiles over on a Russian base. Guess what? We had our soldiers stop getting attacked after that. So kind of same thing. Here we're having balloons floating over. We mentioned earlier that we know where these balloon bases are. Let's launch a cruise missile at them. Let's let them know it's a disproportionate response. If you're going to come to our land, we're going to give you a little sample. And guess what? They're going to learn, hey, that's not a good idea. And we can be like, hey, our cruise missile malfunctioned in your balloon base.
Look,
So
We lost
respect Trump's
navitational
foreign
ability
policy.
of the missile.
I respect Trump's foreign policy, which is why I have to interject. That's not what happened in Syria. What happened in Syria is there were allegations that I've yet seen evidence for of a gas attack, followed by multiple weeks of saber rattling and demands for Trump to act. And then eventually Trump, in an uncharacteristic move, a warning publicly that he's going to act, a warning going out of exactly where he's going to bomb, and then bombs hitting an airfield which was mostly devoid of personnel and vehicles, which is the proper response to our deranged media, saber rattling instead of the president and trying to force the president's hand. He gave them a show of force. Nobody actually got hurt, and Syria continued to do what Syria continued to do. That's what happened in that case. Now, in the case where the United States was actually attacked, or allies got actually attacked, which is when Iran was sabotaging Saudi oil fields and attacking drones and shipping, harassing shipping. Then he responded with quite a bit of a more rigorous response, targeting one of their top generals, who's also an international criminal of great renown. So that's the response. If China was conducting any type of aggressive, actionable, violent operations against the United States, then you bring out the weapons. But we should have that satellite fly overhead. We should be able to to test what's inside that balloon. We should be able to confirm that it has no ability to attack anyone, but we should permit its flight over the United States. And you're saying no civilians, nobody is flying big things over other countries. What about civilian, air travel and air shipping? We regularly fly planes over China, meaning our corporations, and the Chinese actually threatened that. They said, if you start blowing up our stuff, we'll blow one of your cargo planes. Maybe a civilian one too next. It'll be an accident.
I wanted to quickly ask Aiko something. You said that you talked about the balloon bases, and this is perhaps just an area of ignorance of mine. These balloon bases, how populated are they? because if
Well, they're not. Like I've looked at. I don't mean I don't have them in front of me on a map or anything, but CNN had a few like an overhead image of one of them, for instance, and it was almost an entirely abandoned like small island, but then it had like a little complex, and that complex looks like a tiny city, and from it they were just launching all these balloons, so it should be pretty easy to see them where they're launching. But here's another thing that I think NPR was reporting yesterday, that one of the leading theories, like within the intelligence agency, is that this particular balloon was aimed at Guam. So it was supposed to be spying over U.S. territory, but then it got blown off course, like into the mainland United States. This has been a disaster for China. Like, this isn't them pushing boundaries and seeing what they can get away with. This is an operation. That balloon has very limited navigation, and it was designed to navigate itself in a way that would cause it to pass over Guam, so that they could check out our capabilities there, arguably within their sphere of influence. But then when it got blown off course and went to the United States, some of the thinking was it might have opportunistically then steered itself to like assets that it would want to fly over, but that was not its original mission, and that was way too risky for them to have green lighted to begin with. But then once it was over the mainland, that's when they started maybe trying to take. That's one theory. Of course,
Right.
I would take that with a massive grain of salt, because we still don't know the full story of what's been happening with that balloon.
If that's so, let's take that all to be true. It makes sense. My understanding is Guam is a pretty significant U.S. military asset, and kind of to Gibbs, maybe a question for the people opposing Gibbs here: if these balloon bases are not that populated, do we have some right here to seize those balloon bases with our military and say, no, we're not going to let balloons over military assets of the U.S.?
No, I wouldn't think so. I would think that'd be going too far. Absolutely, we have the right to shoot them down. If we'd seen it going over Guam, we would have had a right to shoot that down as well. But keep in mind, like, this goes in both directions. We very famously had a U-2 shot down over Russia, and it was also very high in the altitude. And if you want to, the United States wanted to make claims at that time. Well, first of all, we claimed that it wasn't ours and it wasn't us. But then after that, when we finally admitted to it, we wanted to say that we had the right to be there, because really we were the only people that had the technology at that time. So there are times when we do recognize this right that Casimir is asserting that everyone in the world should have. And the fact is, at this point, we're just quibbling over details, because we all agree that spy satellites are allowed. Like, we don't do anything. We haven't had a Star Wars yet, like where we try to shoot down each other's satellites or capture them or whatever, which, by the way, was one of the potential uses for the space. Yeah, and that was one of the reasons the space shuttle was designed. We were trying to figure out if it was possible to just take a whole satellite and put it in this space shuttle payload, and that's why Russia sort of like reacted the way it did, trying to build its own, because they wanted to have the same capabilities. So we did consider the military uses for that sort of thing. But the fact is, right, there's enough precedent in terms of satellites in space that I think you can at least make an argument for where that territorial right begins at what
Can't you
elevation.
draw a direct analogy between this and the Sputnik case? And the only difference is at the time that we didn't have anti-satellite capabilities. And if the U.S. had anti-satellite capabilities at the moment that Sputnik went overhead, why wouldn't they be in their right to blow it up before it gets over them?
If we had those capabilities then, maybe so. But we've got set precedent now, and we have so many satellites over other countries now that we did,
also
like, when
forgetting the we're the superpower.
It just seems like a
makes
precedent
right.
was
Like,
set
if we can do
because-
it and they can't, like, what are you gonna do about it? Like,
No,
yeah,
no,
that's
mine
not the
was
world
like
we
Nick,
live in
right?
anymore.
It just seems like a
That's the
precedent
thing.
was
I
set
mean,
because the weapon capabilities didn't exist.
But we don't even
It
live in
might
that
is
world
just
anymore.
might.
Like, there was a time, for instance, when we owned all the GPS satellites in the world, so that we could say, okay, all of our sensitive stuff got blurred out, nobody else's did. And as a result, Europe responded by creating the Galileo satellite system, which competes with GPS. And now China has its own, at least over its own airspace. And I think at this point, it's fair to say that we've set the precedent. Anything that the United States does in space, the rest of the world is going to see as precedent for them doing the same.
One question I had for the people who want to shoot this down, which is most of the panel. When you're looking at the difference between a satellite and a balloon, to me, it just seems like there's an altitude difference, right?
Yeah.
The principle seems to be somewhat the same. So is there some kind of hypocrisy here when the U.S., who has access to the technology to have more satellites, is saying, well, that's okay, but the balloons, now you've crossed the line. Now we're going to shoot down the balloons. The people who are in favor of shooting down the balloons, I mean, what is your response to that? I mean, I'm assuming you're not in favor of shooting down satellites.
I am legitimately in favor of whatever is best for us. That is what I'm in favor of. Like, I mean, I don't care if it's hypocrisy.
Who is
I don't
us?
care. Like, I live in Texas. That makes me a United States citizen. So having other countries over here spying on us is not good, Papa. I don't
You're
like
not
you
the
think.
fucking Borg. I'm
Well,
not
I mean,
you.
yeah,
I'm
well,
not in
good.
your brain. You're a different person in a different
What does that have to
country.
do with anything? I mean, if you don't think another country that's a direct competitor coming over and spying on us is bad, and us just going, "Hey, we can stop them, but we're gonna play tiddly bumps instead." Like, no,
Yeah,
that's
there's
terrible.
probably some
That's
alien
terrible.
species spying from
We
us
can't
from
do
a
nothing.
different
And that's kind
galaxy.
of my
Are you
point
going to
too.
blow them up too?
No,
Right?
because
You're
they're
just
bigger
going
and
to
better.
attack everybody, and you're
Listen,
going to use the royal we. No,
we.
it's people on our behalf with money stolen from us are shooting down are
Money
wasting
stolen from
expensive
us.
missiles on non-threats. It's theft against theft, and you're not willing to recognize that.
I
You're
mean,
just
one of them
saying,
benefits me
our
greatly more.
airspace.
I don't think
How is
having
it
China
your
come in here and
airspace?
invade or take over the Pacific is good for the United States as a whole.
How is
So
it
yeah,
your
we.
airspace? Can
How's
you
it our
explain this
airspace?
concept?
It's over our land, bro. Like, if I look up in the
Wait,
sky and
what
I'm
do
a
you mean
government
over
and I
our
see
land?
something and I see it and it's floating, I mean, that's spying on me, bro. It's really simple. This is not like
The
rocket
entire
science.
universe is
I mean, it
over
literally
our
is rocket
land.
science when
Are
we're
you
using the
laying
missile to
claim to
launch
the
it down.
entire
But other than that,
universe?
Okay.
Can I get back in on this?
Yeah,
for a minute here?
Let's give. We're gonna give Tiberius a little bit of room. Go ahead.
Yeah,
All
let's
right,
ignore
so-
all the actual counterpoints and focus on the
Okay.
distractions. Let's go.
Let's go.
All right. So while I'm in agreement with my good friend here, Lactoid Light, when it comes to like, all right, this is a little over the top, is that I'm not the anarchist. I'm not going to make the anarchist arguments. Look, I have no problem with someone wanting to put like or spit in the eye of China, right? But if I'm going to really piss off the Chinese, I'm going to do it in a way that hurts, right? I'm going to send 1st Marine Battalion to the Spratlys and say, hey, if you want to get it, come take it. Like if you want to draw a line in the sand, that's something that I think is far more pertinent because not
Dude.
only is it what
I think we should crater the moon
we
base.
have
That's
something
what we should
quite
do. They
closer.
should be
We have a closer
smoking cratered.
target. How about we
all right,
send
I
that-
pissed
that
off both the
Marine-
crazies. All right,
How
this is a
about-
great time.
How about we? Oh, crazy! How about we
Fourth
send the Marine
let's go. We can do
battalion?
that. I mean,
Let's-
let's invade the motherland. Like,
No,
oh
no,
wow, let's go all the way.
Let's
I mean,
send the
yes,
Marine battalion. Listen, I have a better plan. There's a closer target. We should save on fuel. Fuel is very expensive right now. Send the Marine battalion straight into Washington D.C. to arrest the member of U.S. government who was sleeping with a Chinese spy and wasn't impeached immediately.
you know what we should do? I have the
Maybe
appropriate
we should
response.
maybe
I have
we
the
should
actual.
engage
Okay.
that sovereignty
Oh,
first.
okay. We're gonna give Gibbs. You can go and say what you want to say.
This is
and
what
then
we should
I,
do. They have we're talking. This is all tied to Taiwan to a big degree, right? Here's what we should do. We should throw whatever major fleet is in the Pacific right now and sail the whole thing through the South China Sea and be like, hey, it just navigationally got off course and they went through and they had to go through Taiwan for repairs. You got a problem with that? And see what happens. I think we should just play the game.
You know,
All
who
right,
wouldn't
wait,
have a
hold
problem
up.
with that is Putin. He would love it.
All right, so look,
Take
like,
a lot
if-
of pressure off of him.
if everyone wants to mobilize 7th Fleet, that's an interesting one. But if you really want to bring the Taiwan situation in here and really piss off the Chinese, here's what you do. You go and you recognize Taiwan as the legitimate government of the Chinese people and declare that the PRC is a rogue entity that is a rebellious province. You literally flip the script on them. That would set a precedent.
That's
to a
what
large
Chiang
degree.
Kai-shek
That's a
already was
great
saying.
idea.
Like that was their
I
argument
like
for
this
decades.
idea. Let's do this first. Let's decouple our economy from theirs. Let's do that first. Let's find out reveal all the connections between Chinese diplomats, starting from Chinagate in the 90s, where the Chinese were contributing to the Clinton presidential campaign, and they had to get that money back because of the scandal, right? Let's start with Chinagate. Maybe start, even 30 years earlier. Find out all the money that's flowing into the U.S. government, decouple that from the Chinese Communist Party, right? Decouple all the kickbacks to let's find out where all the children of various U.S. presidents and other government officials work in corporations that are somehow related to China. Let's find all of those connections. And then afterwards, we can talk about Taiwan. I'm ready to put Taiwan on the list. Place 100, maybe 200. As soon as we're clean our own house.
So
we start with Kissinger, right? Presumably.
One thing,
Sure.
kind
Let's
of
put that guy in prison.
Well, sort of along maybe the line, the idea of Kissinger here. I actually want to ask the rest of the panel something that Gibbs said that I actually think, that there is like merit, which is China does not represent U.S. values, right? It represents something of a global adversary. And so even if it's not particularly consistent that we're shooting down the balloons, but we're not shooting down their satellites, legally, we have a lot more space to shoot down their balloons. And if it reduces Chinese influence around the world, shouldn't we be doing it just for that reason alone?
We are their client. How are we shooting ourselves? What's the point? They are in our government. Are you going to address that at all? Like, is this a joke? We're going to saber rattle against them. Our economies are coupled. And they're taking the places where we live, where we engage in a little bit of colonialism, and then they just move in when we, clear the space. What are you talking about? And they're doing it with our help.
Everybody's economy is coupled. Just because China and the U.S. have a larger one than normal, I mean, like,
but who's responsible?
No, it's not the same.
Who signed those trade agreements like 30, 40 years ago?
Nixon.
It was both parties were supporting all of that stuff. They supported that integration. They supported taking a communist country and liberalizing it. And let's see what happened. The liberalization sort of slowed down a little bit. It didn't happen.
Yeah, so I can separate this into 2 points. Number one, the reason that we actually started buddying up to the Chinese in the 70s is that we flipped them on the Cold War. We wanted them to be our ally, not the Soviets, and we basically let them into our economic alliance that actually brought them into our side. The problem is that after 1992, the world just kept going on. We never redressed our strategic policy. We still did guns for butter with the Europeans and for China, which allowed it to develop at our expense. Totally have no problem with anyone raising a concern there. The problem that I have is that there was a reason why we kept doing that even into the 2000s. We did expect China to liberalize, and for a long time they were. But then all of a sudden it went into screaming reverse, and that was because of big data. Unfortunately, whenever you have a authoritarian police state that has no problem with hacking your phone and monitoring everything you're doing, they simply look at you saying that you're going to meet up with your fellow Democratic supporters on Thursday and then show up to pay you a beating. And that pretty much was the end of that conversation in China, which is sad because I was hoping 15 years ago that China was going to be the next big emerging democracy. But big data made it to where that's never going to happen.
Yeah, and this big data and these contracts, for example, Amazon Web Services, our gracious hosts, Daddy Bezos, is receiving contracts from the United States government, and then I'm not sure if it's Amazon. I'll be defensive here. I'm not sure Amazon did it. I'm pretty sure Google though did that. Had a special program in China to help them develop the technologies that are being spoken about, with the plans of bringing them here as soon as they can figure out how to convince us to spy on ourselves even more. I think TikTok though is a brilliant solution. Just right. Start with the kids, just like the smoking industry.
Well, we're about to talk about TikTok, but I want to give a few more minutes to this topic because I do think that really the two issues that play that I'm hearing is we don't see a huge distinction between this being a satellite and a balloon, but it's Chinese, and we don't like the idea of Chinese government objects flying over our house. I mean, Casimir, when you say, who's putting flags in the sky, I get that. But I mean, would you be comfortable with, hovering outside your window, a little Chinese drone with cameras on it? I mean, is there some level of privacy that even if it's outside your house where this is too much, we got to stop the Chinese here?
What I would like is for the justification for these actions to be different. If something is using air currents and is hard to control, and we don't know whether, because it comes from a totalitarian state, it might carry some poison or something. If we want those assurances, because they cannot own property, shoot it down, or figure out a peaceful way of having them receive the same information they want, having them do flyovers, because it's to our benefit. We're two nuclear countries. We shouldn't have major secrets between us. It's not a healthy proposition. Even if we plan to have, if even if our government wants to have them as an adversary or is forced to by their attitude. Now, in terms of a drone right outside of my house, I think that there's going to be developed some standard just by common agreement that if you enter the airspace of a particular town, then and your drone has permission to enter the airspace through some standard. If it violates it, then somebody can shoot it down. It'll be like a common agreement between people. I don't
How is
see
that not
an
exactly
issue
what
with
happened
that.
here?
I don't see how
we have
it's
an airspace.
related to
They
the
didn't ask.
state.
Yeah, isn't it
So
sort of
my
what
issue
happened
is
here?
that's exactly what happened here. We have an airspace. They didn't ask to permission to enter. We never granted permission to enter. They entered. We
No.
shot it down. That's exactly what happened.
No, it's not exactly what happened, because those balloons are high altitude. They're flying above most commercial aviation, as far as I understand. If there's a risk, then you can shoot them down. But if they're way above that, you're basically claiming pre-space and space. You have no way to claim that. Now, if you're constantly
No way to claim it. It's over, or bro. What do you mean? It is an invasion of privacy.
Why not
That's like,
under?
bro. Okay, you know what? That's
Why
like
not
saying
under? They're on
that's
the other
like
side
this,
of the
hold on.
planet.
This is
Yeah,
what this you're
let
saying.
Gibbs
Let me
go.
see what you're. This is like if I put a camera up behind the mirror in a hotel. That's
I'm
it's the
saying
exact same
you
thing.
don't have
You're
a
going in here.
conception of
I don't own the
property.
hotel. Hey, you don't own the wall behind the hotel. It's cool that they're filming you through the mirror. Like, come on, man. That's
No,
what you're
it's not.
saying.
It's a false
It's
analogy.
exactly the same. It's over here. It's floating in our.
What do you mean?
It's
Exactly in the
how-
same
it's an
room within
invasion
space?
of
Are you
privacy.
crazy?
It's
Do you not see
literally.
a difference
Listen, I'll tell you
between
what
the
I see.
hotel room window and fucking space?
No, what I see is
Hello?
the same malicious act, is what I'm saying. They're doing this with malicious intent,
Malicious act? What's the malicious? Do you
just let me
own the
let me
entire
explain.
planet?
Let me explain.
gave
They're
it
over
to
here.
you?
They're
Let
over
Gibbs
here.
explain.
They're over here. They're over here floating a satellite, or not a satellite, but in this case, a balloon, and it's floating over. And it's floating over our bases. It's floating over our civilian infrastructure. There's
It's
not.
floating over half the
Hold
planet
on,
at that
but
altitude.
listen. It's floating over it, and it's gathering info. It's pretty. We're all established. That's what it's
What
doing.
is
right?
over? Can
We
you
all.
think about it? Can you imagine
Okay, wait,
for
wait,
yourself
real
listen,
quick.
listen.
the geometry of it? Can you
Guys,
try
Just-
to
just
imagine the
hear me out,
We're
geometry
gonna
of what you're
so
saying?
we're gonna
What
let
is
Gibbs we're
over?
gonna let Gibbs finish
What
the
I'm saying
point,
is, it's
and then you
basically.
can respond.
It's basically sitting here, and you're saying it's over high, whatever. That doesn't matter. What matters is that what it's doing. It's here floating, gathering information for an nefarious purpose, which is the detriment of the United States to the Chinese, and it is our duty. Like, as a government, to sit here and protect its citizenry. And by letting this balloon float over, it's allowing more dangers to its citizenry. So we got to shoot it down. We got to send a message. I don't understand how that's even confusing for you. We don't need to talk about the rights of airspace past 1,500 feet. That doesn't matter when it's over here clearly spying on us in like a very
No.
blatant and open way.
All right, I gotta butt in here for just a second. I can totally eat the hey, let's shoot down the balloon because it's not really that much of a deal for us to do that, and it's not, unless it crashes into somebody's house, it's not really going to be a concern. We cannot be going around shooting down satellites. It's something called the Kessler syndrome. I don't want to explain that in detail, but basically, if you
The
send
balloon specifically is what I.
No, well, I'm just getting
If you
that's like
destroy a few, you'll block the planet.
yeah, so like the thing is like I will give a difference to if anyone's just like, hey, what is the difference between a balloon at 60,000 feet versus a satellite in Leo? Well, the problem is if you blast the thing out of Leo, like you're just going to turn it into literally orbital shrapnel versus, if you do it in the atmosphere, it's going to crash back down to the Earth. That's a big difference. If that is the only difference that matters to you, fine. Like for me, like there's an ethics conversation here. It's just like, all right, cool. What are you willing to do that you wouldn't be pissed off if somebody else did it to your shit, right? Personally, I'm weird on espionage because espionage on some levels ethically looks horrible, and it literally looks like an act of war just in the process of doing that for a lot of states. And then for the other side of it, it's just like you do have the U2 with Francis Gary Powers, where it's just like, hey, look, they are looking at us, but they're just trying to make sure that we're actually doing the things that we do. And it's weird now because if an aircraft does it, bad. But if a spy satellite in Leo does it, no big deal, which is hilarious because these satellites are so damn good now that literally you can see my house from orbit.
But haven't you given the exact reason why we're forced to allow it when it's a satellite in low Earth orbit, and why we have an option to operate when it's in atmosphere? Like, right, if it's Leo, we are going to run into a Kessler syndrome. We are going to have to worry about if we start blowing up satellites with anti-satellite weaponry, are we going to ever be able to like relaunch satellites into this space? No, probably not. So we can't react here. It's literally like our hands are tied. If we do this, we wipe out things that literally drive the economy of the modern world. So now we have to look at it like, okay, that's an accepted evil. But when a plane over sky, no, that's not. We can blow that up and that'll just land, and we'll collect it and we'll look at it, and that's all that it is.
Okay, real quick. So
So
we're gonna go
I-
Ico, and then we're gonna go with
Yeah.
Casimir, and then we're gonna move on.
So, okay, my question is for Admiral Gibbs, because you're talking about you want to do things that help America and not like you're not necessarily trying to set a precedent for other countries to have those same rights. But you know that in the real world that that's essentially what happens. So my question for you then is like, do you support the Soviet Union like shooting down that U-2, which was at about the same altitude as this balloon? And if so, like,
I think
do you
Soviet Russia was within their rights to do that. Yes, I mean, like now, was I support them doing that? Obviously, as a U.S. citizen, I'm like, damn, I'd probably take whatever propaganda and be like, yeah, whatever. That's our justification for doing it. But yeah, if I'm sitting here being honest, yeah, I think that's their right to defend
But
their
then
country.
once you claim that justification, you tacitly give that justification over to other countries. Like that's what I'm talking about. Like we're talking about.
My point is that they set the precedent of shooting down the U-2 the plane and saying, "Hey, they flew it over our airspace. You were going to shoot you down." I think we should have already been doing that. So like I think they were right. I think we should be doing the
Didn't
same
you
thing.
set a
And
bad
I think they
precedent
have
by
the.
spying on them in the first place?
I mean, and that's my point. You're spying and getting caught. Whenever you're doing spying and you're getting caught and it's blatant, that's really the issue.
Okay, so this is the
espionage.
distinction I want to make. Like, yeah, it's true that I'm for shooting the balloon down or whatever, but what I'm not for is like being outraged that this happened. Like, even if they did like try to spy on us
outraged
with
that
that
China
balloon.
did it because it's yay, good for China. It's
Yeah, I
smart.
fully
And more
expect them to do it,
outraged
and I know
at
that
us
we do
for
it.
our weak response.
Yeah, I fully expect them to do it, and I know that we do it. And so, like, I'm not like under any like illusions that this is like, some like incursion of foreign policy that we don't like regularly engage in. So it's one thing to like, yeah, try to like protect your secrets in whatever way you can. It is true that a lower altitude is going to get a better image than even the great satellites that are up in orbit. So I can understand shooting it down. I don't think China gives a shit that we shot it down. I think they're just embarrassed that the balloon wound up over there anyway. I don't think they intended it to be. And even if they intended it to be, I think they would fully expect it to be shot down just as we would if one of our drones or balloons or anything else like was over somebody else's sovereign space.
I think you're missing a big part, right? And that's even if it was an embarrassment, they actually did it. They're still going to gauge our reaction, and our reaction was the most weak, like limp response I've ever seen. We're gonna wait till it's off the coast of South Carolina after it's floated the whole ocean and then shoot it down. You've got to be fucking kidding me, bro. Like that's outrageous. It's just such a weak response. Like, I mean, how do you even? That's what I'm outraged at. I'm not
Wouldn't
outraged.
the weak response be not blowing it
Fake
up?
outrage.
No, a weak response is doing what we did, and we should have went and cratered their, balloon bases. And guess what? You ain't gonna be launching no more balloons when it's a hole in the ground. It's very simple. A plus B equals no more balloons.
Okay,
I
so
don't
we're gonna
understand
have
why-
Casimir, and then after Casimir, unless you ask a question to somebody, we're gonna move on to the next topic. Go ahead.
What I don't understand is why there's so much bravado and bravery when it's us, when it's ours, when it's our rockets, our missiles, where right now you have prime real estate, a prime opportunity to take all that masculinity and ship it to a certain country in Eastern Europe. And start using all of that masculinity and energy to carry artillery shells to an artillery battery, and experience yourself what it is you're calling for without nuclear weapons, without the consequences of like a destroyed civilization. None of that. You can just participate in a local war representing American values and, in defense of democracy. Right now, you don't need to do any saber rattling. It's available. All that bravery. And yet, inside your country, there are bigger issues that you're being distracted from with the saber rattling. Bigger issues like the same government that you want to oppose is working directly hand in hand with members of your government. And they're spending your money distracting from real problems. I mean, if you want to compare sabers with China, how about you look at our railway system? Look at these channels, these mountains every few feet that a typical train is traveling over in Ohio. and then compare that to the stuff they build in China. You know, even though their stuff is low quality, but they're building much more of it. They're actually investing in their country, and we're not. We're going to be behind. That's the real issue, not these stupid balloons.
Okay, I'm gonna let Gibbs, if you have a quick response to that. If not, we can just move on to the next topic.
I mean, I guess at least those railway systems are going to make good cruise missile targets. I mean, I don't really. I think
Okay.
I don't really. I wholesale like just disagree with. I mean, the whole concept. I mean, that's kind of all I got to say about that.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you guys. This was a incredibly heated first topic, especially about balloons. Who would have thought? Audience, if you are appreciating this, if you are liking the show, please give me a follow and give our friends a follow. You'll be able to, if you stick around to the end, I'm sure they'll be able to shut themselves out. But now we're going to go ahead and move on into the second topic, and let's see their thoughts. So, topic 2: young people have largely shifted to texting as opposed to making phone calls or meeting in person. One of the psychological effects of this could be increased social anxiety and an inability to efficiently convey information. As workplaces and social lives continually shift towards text-based communications, how can we work to prevent this loss of social literacy? Is a lack of social literacy a problem in young people, especially young men, today? What way, if any, is the best way to address this problem? And would regulation on young people using the internet, as they do in China, be effective for the well-being of children? And I want to add one more thing to this because I recently discovered this. Josh Hawley recently proposed a ban on social media for people under the age of 16. So U.S. politics is sort of coming to terms with this, that there is some evidence out there that social media and texting and a lack of human connection could be causing some social issues in young people and children. So I just wanted to get your guys' takes. Admiral Gibbs, we'll start with you.
I just this is one of those things like especially when you mentioned the Josh Hawley thing. This is one of those things where Congress is just gonna always be way behind. I think that's an unrealistic thing for them to even try to do. Like banning social media for people under 16. Come on, that's not gonna happen. Especially as the world gets more technologically advanced. You know, it's gonna become more connected. I think that that's just not realistic, right? And now, as far as like, I feel like this topic kind of touches a lot of broad strokes, like the issues with men and the social. I feel like there's a whole lot of things. I mean, like you can go into why, like, I mean, this doesn't specifically, but I think it's part of that greater social issue with men that's given rise to people like Andrew Tate and others like there's good even now that Andrew Tate's gone, there's the new guy, the macho, like it just is, it's created this space for that kind of content because the men, it does seem like men are suffering at a social level. Now, as far as like the texting and stuff, like I said, I just really feel like, all right, so I work in calls all day and I hate, like, I just got a phone call now while I was doing this. And I was like, I'm not gonna answer that, right? Like, you can just text it back. It's so much more convenient. I can have like 10 conversations at one time instead of like just, talking. So it's convenience, it's ease. Uh, is it a problem? Probably. What are we gonna do about it? Like, I don't really know what to say. I think we're screwed. I just don't really know what to like say about that.
Optimistic. Dijon.
So as far as the texting stuff goes, I think all these technologies are here to stay. They're not going anywhere. And banning them is not the way to go. We should just have our kids try to find different ways to have our kids adapt to this issue as it comes forward. Definitely try to teach them social media literacy. Don't use certain things. Don't react to negative comments. Don't sit there and it's almost like the Tyler the Creator meme, like close your eyes, close the screen. A lot of that stuff, and also creating affinity spaces for them in real life where they can actually have peer-to-peer contact. Things like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, T-ball, softball, like all these different things. Having a kid play a sport, just somewhere where they're going to be outside of school, where they're going to be around their peers and they're going to be engaging with social behaviors and activities and team building stuff. That's really the way to foster this type of belief or skill in any type of kid.
Aiko.
Oh, what a perfect lead-in for me, because this year, so I've been. Some people may know I'm a debate coach. I've been doing that for 35 years, off and on, sort of in that area. But this year, for the first time, I'm sort of in an academy that we're building up, and I was the first hire, and we're building up at all age levels. And one of the things that we're doing in order to get these new kids that are joining this debate academy to socialize with each other is I'm putting them all in Slack. Every class has its own room within Slack, and then there's a communal room for them to talk to each other as well. And then, of course, they can DM all of their coaches and each other. And so that's a perfect example of what DGen was talking about, where they have social media that's oriented towards their face-to-face stuff that they do when they're in class. And so they sort of can gel as a team. They know each other both offline and online, and it allows them to like share their work and do a lot of things in context. So I was a little bit surprised to hear Lactoid's like introduction on this, because I don't think this danger of social media is lack of communication skills. In fact, studies show that this newer generation has communication skills in droves, in part because they're exposed to text early, which makes it easier to read and things like that. We know that it might have some impact on attention span, but that actually isn't a problem with debate, because you need to be able to switch from topic to topic as much as you can. So in our program, that I'm not saying that as much as a liability, but I do think that there is a danger in terms of what kids are exposed to at young ages. I think the exposure to adult content in particular is something that we don't talk about at all. There seems to be an assumption that parents will control this stuff. And I can tell you that watching kids, as social media has arisen, and watching how like kids have reacted to it over the decades, I can tell you one thing that I've noticed from year to year to year until now is that parents, by and large, do not monitor any of what's going on the internet for their kids. Nothing is filtered, and even the rare parent that tries, the kid knows how to get around it. So I think the danger is not in communication skills or any of that kind of stuff. It's not making kids more autistic or anything like that. The danger, I think, is exposure to adults.
Okay, Casimir.
I don't mind the idea behind Haley's law attempt. I don't think it'll ever pass. I don't think it'll pass. If it will pass, it'll be enforceable. So I don't think that's the solution. I think that's the problem with conservatives and other socialists, is they sometimes identify the right problem, but they never figure out the right solution. And the solution is to remove, escapism through text, disassociation with society, drug abuse, video game addiction. All of those are the same type of symptom, which is, again, through, if you want studies, the great rat experiments that were conducted. When the rats are subjected to living conditions that are horrible, when there's overpopulation, when there's too much manipulation of their natural interactions, then you have the rats resort to escapism, drinking the laced fluid that allows them to experience euphoria. And as soon as the conditions improve, as soon as the population gets slightly spread out, then all of that behavior naturally disappears with no training required. Now, with children, the issue is very, very multifaceted. It's the way our cities are built. It's the highway systems. It's the boomers, what they were doing to society from the 50s. It's the idea of how these problems are solved. It's the government schools that are teaching, completely stupid things and how people experience socialization in these prison-like institutions. All of that is the problem. Now, interestingly, the technology is actually advancing away from text. It is going to be more and more video and advanced forms of video. That's where everything is going. That's what you're seeing right now on this panel. So I'm not concerned about that. But I am concerned about children escaping into virtual reality away from real reality. And to solve that, you need to make fundamental change to society. You should look at who has success. Everybody has been mocking the Amish. Everybody has been mocking various traditional Jewish communities for decades, and there was a reason to. They're a bit too strict, and so for some people, that's unbearable, and they have to leave. But for a lot of people that remain, their societies are the only ones under similar conditions like him, compared the same city, the same county, the same state, they're the only ones that are healthy. How do they prevent their children from using technology? Some of those groups have the technology accessible. Well, their children have more meaningful lives because the mother is in the home, because the father is the one working, because they homeschool. That is the solution, is to improve the quality of life, and it's done without the help of government in all of these communities. The government can step away and not interfere, as it constantly tries in these communities, and we can learn something from them. That's what we do. And what Wick is doing is really good. I disagree with him. I hope he's not making it ideological. But what he's doing is also a proper approach. He's not using, I hope, government grants, right? He should find a private sponsor. And then that's perfect. Find more of those people and support them.
All right. So, Tiberius, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot I can say to this, so I'll try to keep it as short as I can. First and foremost, thank you for necromancing this particular texting topic from 2008. It's very interesting to see this particular chat come back. I don't think the texting part's actually that big of a deal. Like, this was my generation's issue, right? So we're well fucking past that shit, right? We had T9 texting, for God's sakes. So I'm just gonna, like, fucking saddle that up and roll. Here's the problem. Is Gen Z antisocial? Yes, they are. The problem is that we have a sampling bias to a large degree because they were raised by Gen X. And Gen X raised them to believe that, look, no one's going to be on your side. Social Security and Medicare aren't going to be around by the time you need it. They basically convinced them that their claim to fame, the way they should view the world, is the Hunger Games. And it's very, very clear that that is exactly how they see the world. They're not millennials. We think that we're Harry Potter. They think that they are a Hunger Games contestant. So when it comes down to it, is that, yeah, we're going to see levels of, I believe the technical term is neuropathy when it comes to these folks, is that they don't want to associate in the same ways that millennials do. We're social butterflies, they're not. What is the thing that I want to see is not the Gen Z folks, it's the Alpha generation that's right behind them. Remind you now, the oldest of them is going into high school now.
Yeah, those are my students.
Yeah, that's where I want to see some data here, because they are the ones that are going to be like fully in depth raised by people who are hyper social aware, but also understand how horrific the internet can be, which leads me to my final point. I think whether it is banned or whether people wake up to the actual reality here is that the days of the open range internet's coming to an end, one way or another, because the vast majority of people who have like a brain in their skull recognize how horrifically toxic the average internet is. Look, I can get on Twitter, I can see all the bullshit on there. It's literally 1% of internet traffic, if that. I don't think this is nearly as bad as what we think it is, because we're hyper, political, and we like to engage with these crowds. But the vast majority of people that I talk to who actually have a job, who actually, go out and do real things, they barely spend any time on these kind of things. And the older they get, the less that they do so. I think this problem is literally just going to go away one way or another by the end of the decade.
All right. So there was so much there that I disagree with. First of all, your characterization rather of Gen Z is just completely off. I was a high school teacher for a while. I've interacted with hundreds of these kids. They do not view the world as Hunger Games contestants. That is not. No, they are not antisocial. They have friend groups just like every other like age of kids at any time would have friend groups. They engage in sports at the same level. They engage in like their classrooms. They're all doing the things that I expect them to be doing as kids. None of them are sitting there like doing this Hunger Games contestant.
Yeah,
I
you
just
made
don't
us
know
all
where
sound
you.
like all the farts.
Yeah, I'm 24. I'm part of this. I'm like the older version of Gen Z. Like I know exactly. Like that's my generation. They do not view the world like this. The Gen Xers, yeah, they're a little depressed, but that's their thing. Then we can move on to watching like the Alpha generation coming up behind them. Dude, they act the exact same way. Like you said, the oldest ones of them are becoming freshmen in high school. I can barely tell the difference between the freshmen coming in and the seniors that are leaving. They're pretty much acting the same. So neither of them are antisocial as far as I can tell from my anecdotal evidence. And then furthermore, it's like, I don't think that the days of the open range internet are coming to an end. It's like You understand that this is like Pandora's box. It's already open. You are never going to put this back in the cage. It is a decentralized, anybody can get on anywhere and do whatever they want. You're never going to reel that back in unless you want to like destroy all of the internet connections in the world.
Yeah, so when I talk a little bit about like Gen Z, I will say that I'm being a bit hyperbolic here, right? But there is levels where we absolutely can see in the data that they are a lot less sociable than what millennials were. Not only in that they reach their milestones later. They get their first car at average at 18 and not 16. They are left home at literally 3 years later. I can go into the details here. I just don't have them on hand here. But literally, The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt. It's a great book that goes into these details very, very well. Gen Z is behaving very, very differently, whether it is social media or not. Now, getting into social media, look, I totally get where some people are like, oh, we're not putting this genie in the box. The data's already there. Internet traffic's going down in a lot of these particular areas because these environments are getting toxic. And as much as I like how Twitter has been opened up to a large degree, we're already seeing the numbers start going down with Twitter, is that people aren't engaging as much because it's even more shitty. Because now instead of having just left-wing shitbags, we have right-wing and left-wing shitbags. And so what we consistently keep seeing here is that either you're hyper engaged online, and so you're, grandpa on, Facebook at 60, and you're just reading about all these conspiracy theories about how Hunter Biden smoking Chinese crack, or you're a Gen Z guy on Twitter who is believing the Republicans are going to kill all trans people. This
Gen
isn't
Z
going to
doesn't
last.
use Twitter. Gen Z uses Twitch and Discord.
And also what they use is they use communication chats that I don't even remember the name of. I'm not using them. I'm not aware of them. What's unique to those chats that I see sometimes, my younger friends like send me the like screenshots out of them, and like, what is this thing you're using? What they really like is communication that disappears, that has like no long term effects on their lives, and they're brutally honest, quote unquote toxic, and they love it. They love the freedom. They love the ability to just like yell out into the air, my teacher is an asshat, and like have like 100 likes, and then they disappear the next day, and nobody becomes a criminal over that. And they keep doing that. And there's things we're not aware of what children are doing, and we're distracting from the real problem. The problem is the inability to develop healthy technologies, because there is a conglomerate of corporations tied with the state. They're controlling the IPs, are spreading the IPs as like a nuclear weapons among each other, like a nuclear proliferation, where like Xerox and Amazon and Apple and Google can't sue each other because they control so many, cross referenced patents. But if somebody new comes in who's innovative, who's trying to, let's say, create a social network that somehow detects all the pedo stuff, and removes that, suddenly that guy will have issues. That guy will have patent lawsuits. The trolls will come after him, will shut him down. That's the barrier that we have to the system becoming healthier. And when this is sort of skipped over, when this is evaded somehow, that's where we see healthy things get introduced into the internet. And if you want to fix things, look at the culture. Look at what the major proponents of culture in our society are doing. Look at what shows Netflix is putting on. Look at what shows HBO is putting on. And what is our response? Our response is giddy glee at absolutely disgusting stuff. Our response is to look at a Game of Thrones episode and like season and say, so brilliant, so brilliantly filmed, while it has complete antisocial messaging deeply embedded in what it chooses to show you and what it chooses not to show you. Those forces are desocializing. We don't have any way we shouldn't have any government way to criticize them, but we have the social responsibility to criticize them, and we really don't.
I want to say I think that y'all really touched on a lot here, and so I feel like it's really the reason why it's kind of such a broad topic here is because it's really indicative of like a larger problem. Like y'all mentioned the internet being free range days are over. I don't think it's that the free range days are over as much as it's become multiple spheres, right? Like you'll have a 4chan, and that's wild, right? You'll have Twitter, it's the Wild West. Then you'll have like the cancel areas. You'll have like Facebook that's more professional, or LinkedIn that's more professional. And then you have like the Discords, you have like Telegram, you have Snapchat to do the stuff like he's talking about where you send it and it's gone. So it's all kind of like filtering out, right? But I feel like this has all enabled a bigger problem, which is what Casimir kind of mentioned, which is the culture. And I think that the culture has developed, and that's the real problem. It is causing, like, it glorifies, for lack of a better way. Have you ever read the book by Eric Bischoff, the wrestling guy? Controversy creates cash. That's kind of like what the world has done in hyper mode. So, like, cancel culture is real big. We like to cancel people. We like like soundbite takes. All sorts of things like that, and that leads to a sort of like embrace of the toxicity. I feel like, with the social awkwardness of men not being able to be in social situations as much, it's kind of like, it gets into the topic of, feminization of men, and like the lack of, like, the rise of toxic masculinity, or what is masculinity. And I think all of this all goes hand in hand, which, like I said, I think Casimir hit on the head with. It's a culture issue.
I want to just maybe briefly, the internet can be toxic. I understand that. I guess what I was thinking of when I wrote this is, I know people, and I have had friends who, um, they can't make a phone call, right? The social anxiety is too much, right? When they need to call a restaurant and order food, they want somebody else to do it for them, not because they're incapable, but because picking up the phone and calling somebody brings a tremendous amount of dread, right? When you're going into the workplace and all you can do is send emails, and you have a difficult time talking to people, that can lead to a lot of issues. And especially in the legal field, I'm noticing that, right? As I'm going through my career, I'm noticing that so much of the older attorneys rely on kind of that trust, that loyalty, that social aptitude of being able to pick up the phone and call them. But there's so many young people, especially people who are just entering the field, who can't do that. They can only send emails, and they're just so much more comfortable with text-based communication as opposed to picking up the phone and hearing another human voice. Um, Obviously texting is super convenient, but is there something that we're losing there? Is there some kind of social humanness that comes with hearing another person's voice? I mean, we're in a panel here. If this was on text, it'd be a very different experience.
I'll split this into two really, really quickly. The first and foremost is that your experience, and I know people on this panel don't agree with me, at least the data that I've seen overwhelmingly shows that that is the trend with Gen Z, is that they do have higher levels of social anxiety. They do not socialize remotely as well as even like Gen X does, which was a little more antisocial. And when it comes down to it, yeah, they do not like want to make phone calls. There's a kind of a running joke in my field that the job that Gen Z wants is to work from a closet that locks from the inside. Um, that's kind of where they're at now. Getting out of the hyperbolic territory, though, is like we can see very well, even on these platforms, the difference between being on camera just versus hearing the voice. Like you can see who gets respect, who actually is engaged with versus who gets like talked over consistently. Just the me being on camera has an immense amount of like body language and communication that goes along with it, which is incredibly important. Versus if you're just an avatar, or I mean, even the VTuber thing's a little different. We've seen that, and then you get as you go down the tiers where it's just text. I mean, there is a reason that Twitter and Facebook and all these are just generally like hate threads more often than anything else. It's just because one, people don't edit what they think, which is hilarious because it's text. You actually have the opportunity to edit, but you don't. And then when it comes down to it, sorry, I'm getting a little choked up here. When it just seems to come down to it, is that text does not convey emotion. It doesn't convey any kind of like tone or shifting, and so people are largely allowed to take it where they may. And unfortunately, what we've kind of discovered, and this is a perception argument though, is that people are assholes. And they don't really trust each other very much.
So
But that's
I
a
can
whole other
agree with
conversation.
you. I can agree with you on the tone. I think you do lose a lot of like tone, and sometimes things are misread or misinterpreted through text, and that's a problem, right? And people always need to be better at refining their messaging, right?
Hmm.
Do take issue with the idea that like trying to think of how I want to phrase this.
Let me just jump in while you do that. I just want to add to the social awkwardness
Wait,
thing.
real quick, Degen, I want to give Degen just a moment to
Okay.
say his stand, and then we'll go.
Well, no, you can go ahead. I'll think of it. I'll go after.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I just it felt like you had a pause. I just wanted to throw this in because it's a quick tidbit. On the social stand, I just pulled this up because I remembered reading it recently. It's this is on Newsweek, and it's saying Gen Z is having up to like 84% less sex than than us, the millennials, right? So what's the reason for that? There's gotta be some kind of societal reason, and I want to know like it's got to be the isolation.
Yeah, I
That's
can
really the only thing I
explain it.
come up with. Yeah, it's a
I
big
can
portion.
explain it. So when I debate people, I do bring one empirical point quite consistently because I don't think there is an answer to it that it's comfortable for many people on the panel, which is if you look at the fertility numbers, and the way you look at them is so the way they look is they look at like 50 plus ages, like 50 to 60. They do like survey, they find sample groups, and they ask how many children you have for various samples of populations. The best studies that I would look at is Washington Post did a quick one, Pew Research did a very complex one for religious communities. That's where you see the most distinction across the United States, and you can hopefully they will release their data city by city so we can actually compare locations. Now here's what they found. Agnostics are at 1.3. Now what does the number mean? Each adult has to produce 2 children without anything nefarious happening for our civilization to continue across the entire planet. And it becomes really rapidly very bad if we exceed that too much or we go below like 2. So any stable society has to be at like a 2 and a tiny fraction. Like some people should have 3 children because there's going to be excess mortality. People are going to die before they reproduce, unfortunately. So the number you're looking for is 2. Agnostics are at 1.3, which means that people that are of agnostic belief are disappearing. Like the population is declining by almost half every generation. It's horrible, and it's concentrated in the cities. Atheists doing slightly better, 1.6. Most progressive
I don't
branches
know
of
how
religion.
we got here. Why?
I was gonna say, is the
I'll
problem
explain
fedoras
why.
not
I'll explain
texting,
why.
or what's?
Because there is an idea. People that have a purpose in life, people that believe, have faith that God gives them that purpose, they tend to want to reproduce. They have that commandment in some of their religious writings.
Why is this on reproduction right now? What does reproduction have to do with the sociability of
It's
Gen Z and the age of technology and
maybe the
social
lack of
media?
we
sex.
talked about the rate of them having sex, the rate of them reproducing, and it's like an empirical metric of the health of our society. If you believe that you have a bright future, then you want to share that future, beyond where
And this is
everybody
categorically
this
untrue. We
world
can track
dies,
income
and you
levels.
do that with children.
This is categorically false. We can track income levels like developed nations, places where it's shitty, where there's high infant mortality. People have more kids simply because more kids are going to die while you're having them. As soon as you get to like developed Western world standards, your replacement rate, you hit about 2 kids per family. These things drop as you get better qualities of life and better outcomes for yourself. Your rate of having kids drops because you're more focused on your own life here. And
Gets
Tiberius, I wanna
below
respond
2.
to something you
I
said
need to
there.
Not
split
among
hairs.
religious groups. The religious groups that exist in the same
one
societies
moment. So
stay at 2 or higher.
okay, so Tiberius and then Casimir.
All right, I need to split hairs here because while we can talk about like the general fertility rates and reproductive rates, the problem is that they are a mask for the actual sexual activity rates because the number one correlation between if you have kids or not in the modern era is do you have access to the pill? That straight up is it. The second correlation is urbanization. We can do that another day. But the long and the short here is that millennials, my generation, loves to have sex. We do pretty damn well at it, to be honest. And we put up some pretty good numbers on that one. But we are having kids later and later and later because while we are having sex, we are just simply putting that off for a number of reasons. I'm not going there. The thing that was brought up earlier that is the kicker point, though, is that Gen Z is not having sex in the same way the millennials were. And I do highly attribute that to the lower levels of socialization. I'm not an expert in this thing. Like I do like developmental economics. I talk about like why Gen Z wants to prefers coding versus like millennials actually want to be like supervisors. That's my kind of gig. Why people get in each other's bedrooms is not mine. But what I can definitely say is that the trend line that we've definitely seen is that things that would convey towards having a more sociable appetite, just dating in general, sexual activity, number of relationships. Every data point that I've seen outside of like the most hair-in margins has Gen Z down by anywhere around 7 to 10 points compared to the millennial counterparts. And while that might not sound like a big issue, remind you that when the math is done, you're talking about something on the order of about, 6 million people having like sex compared to millennials. That's a lot of people.
So, Casimir, I'm going to give you an opportunity to briefly respond, but then I actually want to ask Aiko something.
The reason why I brought this up, and he will not tell you about the fact that all of this data gets disproven by religious people living side by side in the same economic, layers of society, in the same cities, in fact, and are actually reproducing, this is one of the problems. The religious people have like a 2,000, maybe more year lead on you in terms of giving people a goal, giving people a conception of the meaning of life, and a reason to persevere despite great adversity. And they have a reason to socialize because they have religious services every week on one of the holidays. They have to all meet up. They have religious holidays where they have to meet up. They have requirements very often to congregate, meaning they can't actually pray without a certain number of people present. All of that keeps bringing people together. When you interact with those people, you find out that there's like a wedding every week, and the person gets tired of attending weddings. A person gets tired of attending, various social events in his community because there's so many of them. He has over socialization. Now, who doesn't have that? People who have said religion is bad, let's reject religion, and for 100 years have built nothing new, have absolutely failed. Now, the godfather of this idea, Nietzsche, warned everybody. He said, God's dead, replace him. No replacement, only failure. And now we're analyzing the symptoms and we're saying, how is this happening? And we're ignoring the solution. Now, either invent some replacement or look back into tradition and try to figure out what happened.
So, Aiko, I wanted to ask you. You stated that you've been at the debate coach. You've been a debate coach for 35 years or so, and I'm assuming then you've sort of seen a number of generations of people go through your classes. You've seen how they act towards each other, how they act towards you. Have you noticed any shift from, if the best of your recollection, from the first class that you had to the most recent? Any noticeable shift in socialization and being able to look you in the eyes and communicate with you?
No, not among debate kids because, no, yes and no, I guess a little bit. But debate kids, okay, so if you really want to know, back in the 1960s, there was a kid who realized that in a timed speech, he could get more arguments in if he spoke a little bit faster. And and as a result, he started winning more rounds on a technical basis. And then so an arms race started where other people had to speak a little bit faster in order to get more arguments in their time speeches, and so on and so forth. And now, like top tier policy debaters speak at about 350 words a minute, which is auctioneer speeds. And you have to pay college kids to come judge for you because they're the only ones with the technical proficiency to like be able to take notes at that rate of speed. My limit these days is about 250 words a minute, so I've slowed down in my old age, but I still judge those rounds on a regular basis. Those people who are like, yeah, they're really good at logic and reason. It's one of the reasons why they win debate tournaments is because of because of how they sort of train their brain to like swap sort of logical arguments at higher and higher rates of speed or whatever. But it comes at the cost of socialization. So if you're to look at like Aristotle's like rhetoric, when he talks about pathos, logos, and ethos, they're really good at logos. That's what they're best at. They're not bad at ethos because they're like good at checking sources and they have media literacy and all. They're terrible at pathos. And then you have what we call interp kids who give oratories or they do dramatic events or they do like duet acting, things like that. And then they're just the opposite. They're highly social. They're not great with logic, and they don't care about ethos really, unless it's like the ethos of like a great playwright or something like that, or the ethos of a poet. And so and those like it's almost like they have their own cliques, like the jocks and the nerds and like in school normal. And I would argue that those kids are the same today as they were like in my youth. The politics of debate has changed like fundamentally. Debaters were conservative like in the 80s when I was like coming up, and now they tend to be like overwhelmingly progressive, like beyond Twitch levels of progressive. Like it's insane how they go.
I had a quick question about this because I don't
Yeah.
know about the ideology part of it. But do you think that some of the consistency you've seen is because there's a bit of a selection bias? Like there's people self-selecting
Yes,
to go do
exactly.
debate, and that's somebody who already is not adverse to confrontation. They're already okay with looking someone in the eye and saying I disagree with you, which is above and beyond just normal social interaction.
Well,
It's direct
that's just it.
confrontation.
Those kids that are in that form of debate that are going 350 words a minute, they're not looking you in the eye, and they do have those same
Talking about
socialization
CX debate,
issues.
right? You're talking about like
Yeah.
CX as opposed to like Lincoln Douglas style.
Yeah, but Lincoln Douglas has become
There's-
CX, and CX has kind of just gone into has become even more CX. There's about 5 different every 10 to 20 years or 15 years maybe they come up with a new form of debate to become the lay version of debate. But then over time that form, so LD has become technical now. So then they came up with something called public forum, which was supposed to be the lay debate, and so on and so forth. Now there's world debate. And so each form of debate becomes more technical over time as it gets more competitive. And as it gets more competitive, yeah, like the focus is less on social persuasion and stuff like that. I actually forced my kids to do some of the interpretive events just to balance out the shit that they learn in debate, because if you don't have the mix, like you're going to have trouble socializing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that's a problem that existed. It's interesting. It was the social media problem that you described, but like long before social media.
Right. So thank you guys. Just because of the timing, we're going to move into the last topic. This is a topic that I definitely wanted to touch on. There's a lot of moving parts here. So thank you for the audience for tuning in. And we're going to move on to the third topic now. So topic 3. In Mississippi, the House has voted to create a state-appointed court system within the city of Jackson, Mississippi, a city that is overwhelmingly black. The officials that would determine the appointments to this court system are overwhelmingly white. However, the new district will target a primarily white area of Jackson, the only white area of Jackson. This policy has been likened by political opponents to be reminiscent of Jim Crow and an attack on black leadership. In the context of U.S. federalism, should people have a right to have their localities control their justice system? Why should localities control their court system as opposed to the state controlling that court system? And if you disagree with state courts, do you respect federal courts? Should a significant racial or cultural difference change any calculus? And if so, why? Let's start with Gibbs.
It's kind of a complicated issue. In Texas, we like elect our judges, right? And this seems like to be not the case here in Jackson, Mississippi. I think this comes back to the bigger conversation of gerrymandering and what you think about that. And basically, my opinion on gerrymandering is, it's good when it's my side, it's bad when it's somebody else's side. So, like, I mean, I kind of like, I kind of know, I don't really know, if I think it's Jim Crow when it's targeting a predominantly white area. I guess they're saying they're going to get favorable conditions of policing. I'm not really sure what they're, like argument here is like why it's such a bad thing. I don't know. Anyway, but if you're asking what localities control the court system, I think the state has pretty much authority to control its own courts outside the federal system. I think that's a fair. That's all it's always been. That's how it should be. And then once we get back to the federal system, the Fed decides how it wants to do its courts. So if it's up to the overall state to decide something, then it's if you don't like the way it's being run and gerrymandered, vote them out of office if you can.
DJ,
County
go
court,
ahead.
brother. So there's county courts. This is just a point to what Gibbs was saying before. Reading the Guardian article that you linked me with this, because I actually hadn't heard about this before, so I've only read a little about it. There's a pretty damning quote in here that I think cuts against the grain of any type of like federalist argument you could make here, where like, oh, I should be like governed by the locality, which is no serious person can look at this map and this data and claim the proposed CCID boundaries weren't drawn to make sure as many white Jacksonians as possible get the benefit of a special police force and a court filled with handpicked judges and prosecutors, said Cliff Johnson, director of the Roderick and Solange MacArthur Justice Center. If that's true, if that analysis of this is real, where essentially they drew a district just so the white residents of a city or a county could be excluded from the overall judicial system and criminal justice system and have their own special avenues to go through, that seems incredibly racist and corrupt. I mean, I would be against any group doing this for themselves. It would be horrible.
All right, Aiko.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't ready to unmute. Yeah, okay. So I on this one, I sort of come down like I'm Catholic. I come to the Catholic Church has a principle of subsidiarity, which is the principle that says that the government problems should be solved at the level of governance that is most local, if it can be effective at that level. So like if you can handle like the most local form of government would be like a municipality or even a subdivision of that, like in New York City it would be like a borough. But like the more local you can get to solve your problems, the better. And I understand that you have to have a certain like level of population in order to make that. There are some levels at which it fails, in which case the level of government higher up then should be best suited for it, should go in at that level. So like here in Texas, for instance, there were now I'm generally pro fracking for reasons I can get into later, and I promise this will become relevant. But here in Texas, there were certain counties and cities that didn't want fracking in their area, and so the state of Texas came in and said, you know what? We're not going to respect your local laws. We're going to overrule it with state level laws, and we're going to mandate fracking all over Texas, whether or not a local community wants it. Like now, even though I'm pro fracking, that to me is a terrible way to do it, because you should let like the local people like be able to run their things unless they've proven that they can't. Like when the state of Arkansas couldn't get desegregation to happen, and that was something that the Supreme Court decided was like a right within the Constitution. Okay, at that point, the federal government had to step in, but that should be an exception to the rule. That shouldn't be the rule. And so when you have like local areas that are capable of policing themselves, yeah, I think it's wrong like for the state to come in and do that. I think the racial element of this like makes it all the more understandable why people are rising up. But I don't think you have to have those racial elements in order to disagree with what's going on.
Right, Casimir.
I'm in complete agreement so far, and I like the fact that Wick is using his like deontological positions and the church as some foundation, because at least we have some history there of something that actually works in society versus these crazy experiments we're in socialism that we're running. And this is a group ownership over people. These are local people are trying to create some kind of an autonomy, like increase their own autonomy. But because they're a particular race, we're gonna call out that race. We're gonna call out a category we consider fake, using a fake derogatory name. We're not gonna call them European. We're gonna just address their skin color. Like maybe we don't know who these people are. Are they Jewish? Are they Italian? Are they Irish? They're just generically white, and therefore evil colonizing oppressors that we can rant against. What's happening here is a prison fight. everybody is hijacked by the federal or state governance that meddle in everybody's affairs. And the way that the warden keeps everybody distracted from what's actually going on is racial animus and gang fights, where in reality everything is really innocent. If you have a local community, it doesn't matter what it consists of, the court should be as local as possible. And then when the courts have some kind of a border dispute or contradiction, only then do you potentially need to arbitrate and bring somebody from the outside, which is how things used to be done in the United States, and that was better. We can eliminate the racist stuff, which hasn't been coming from the majority community. The racism is currently coming from the minority communities, and that's causing some of that pressure. So whenever people want to create autonomies and want to separate, I think we should be generally ethically pro-separatism, particularly when nobody is harmed and when some kind of like consequentialist harm can be minimized. Do we have a principle? This is the principle of the foundation of the country, which is separatism from imperial authorities. That's what we're supposed to respect. That is American, and what is coming from Degen dialectics is this type of un-American stuff that the founding fathers fought against.
All right, so we're going to move on to Tiberius, but I just want to quickly correct the racism. Not all white bearded men are the same. It is Ico, not Wick. But you go ahead, Tiberius.
Ico, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. You're actually not the first person who's called me Wick. Like,
he's just older.
for half a
Wick, all
pedal.
right. He
Yeah,
invented a time machine. Okay. All right. So when it comes to the racism thing, like there's a lot of weeds that I can get into here, but I'll just supplant it very, very clearly here. When it comes to race issues, I do not give the South hardly any credit because they are by far the most racist people in this country, outside of maybe the Californians, but that's a whole other conversation. Whenever
Austin would like a word with you, sir.
well, the problem is that Californians are just absolutely hateful to white people, but that's a whole other conversation.
I mean, all
Anyway.
liberals are ultra racist. That's not
Yeah,
hard,
we're
really.
All right. Anyway, whenever it goes to the other parts of this particular conversation is that when it comes to like legalism, I'm not the biggest expert here. And usually when I ask Lactoid what his opinion is and kind of dissect that a little bit, but whenever it comes to like, all right, I want like micro representation on the jury versus macro? I generally go with this. I like legalistically, I'm a lot more Unitarian in the federalism debate. I like common law applying to as many people as possible. I like as many people as possible having the same general rules, and generally as few rules as possible, so we all know what the fuck they are. Obviously, that's a little bit complicated, but basically, when it boils down to it, is that I want the rule set to be apply, as fairly and as widely as possible. When it comes to like a jury of your peers, I do like that more like administrative, like go to your county kind of part, because if someone's going to judge you, your peers, they are going to be the most likely to understand like if there's any kind of like extra legality that comes into whatever crime or whatever things have been committed. I know I'm speaking in like carte blanche, like massive terms here, but I'm just kind of painting the picture. Is that's generally where my default is. When it comes to this, I'm not an expert enough in like what is this Mississippi law to tell you like, all right, this is completely out of bounds. This shouldn't be allowed. But I'm just gonna throw a wrench at them. This is probably a bunch of white people in Jackson being assholes, because I've met a lot of them and they are assholes down in Jackson. So I will floor it with that.
White is a racist term. They should stop using. Stop accepting.
White.
There is a
all right,
reason.
I'll go down this
why
road.
the progression of language. Since I came into the country, I first had to learn what is a Caucasian. Never used it as the designation for myself.
I'm gonna beat the drum here for a second. White is an Americanism. I hate the idea that Europeans are considered white. It's absolutely fucking moronic. They're not white. They're Anglos. They're Germans. They're French. They're Poles. They're not white. White people in America are their own ethnicity, though. No. They are their own group of people. Yes, we have blended together. We are Americans. We have our own ethnic group. That's a whole different can of worms. If you don't identify with that, cool, get the fuck out. I don't care. When it comes down to it, we are a people. who have a common culture, a common history, and a common language that we speak. We are an ethnic group. We consider ourselves white because that is what we have amalgamized into. We don't have another name for it because calling it Americans is weird because there were people here before us that we also call American. When there's
It's
also
not weird.
You know, it really is. It actually is very weird because we don't have a terms for this because our ethnicity
No,
is
it's
only
not
about 200
weird.
years old.
If you watch any documentary where people go to the Indian tribe that prefer that name for themselves, but generally when you really ask them, if you ask them, is Indian offensive to you? They generally say no. Is Native American offensive to you? They generally say yes or maybe. Indigenous is more accurate, but the most accurate is to call them by their tribal name and to actually learn that the fact that there are different tribes that are not the same, don't consider themselves the same. And similarly, there are people that came in here into the United States, and I agree with you on one thing. There is a concept of a meta culture, of a civic culture in the United States that did develop, and it's called America, Americanism, Americanization. And we used to absorb people into that culture quite forcibly up until the 70s. And then the current policy is called multiculturalism, where people are not forced to integrate into the metaculture at all. They're in fact promoted into segregating. So we have this backward balance.
No, we have data that actually disproves this. So when we look at second and third generation immigrants and the children of first generation immigrants that come here, first generation immigrants show up and their ideologies and their political beliefs typically align with their home country, with their country of origin. By the second and third generation, their political ideologies and their political views mirror the native population almost entirely. They adopt an entirely like Western liberalized ideology. It does not matter. Like they are not secularized. They're not allowed to remain. Well, they are secularized. They're not allowed to remain in these like insecure little pockets. We don't have things like Chinatown or Little Italy popping up as frequently as we used to, simply because of this fact. You're assimilated much faster and more effectively in today's society. Absolutely.
Same thing happens with language, by the way. Like first generation often doesn't speak English. The second generation is bilingual, and the third generation often like loses the language of their family and speaks only English.
I want to use what was just said by Dejan actually to, I guess, kind of clarify the point of contention that's happening in Mississippi right now, because although it may
I'm a little confused about that.
Although it may be true that Little Italy and Chinatown aren't popping up as frequently, one of the segregations here that's persisted consistently is among race between white Americans and Black Americans, if I can use those terms. And in Mississippi, this is particularly the case, right? In Mississippi, only 22% of white people identify as Democrats, and only 12% of Black people identify as Republicans. There is a racial political split in the state of Mississippi. And this is relevant because Jackson is primarily Black, which makes it, just according to the numbers, primarily Democrat. And the section of Jackson that is white is not as Democrat comparatively. And so I guess it kind of leads to a question here of, if the motivation for the East Jacksonites is based politically, is it still racist if it overlaps with race significantly? If they just want to get out because they don't want to be under a Democratic hold anymore, is that racist if, well, it's also tied with race here?
I'll jump in on this for a second. The problem that I have is that if you were going to put it in that particular framing, I would actually say no. The problem is that I've seen Southern history and I've seen how the Southerners act. And the problem is politics is race and politics are very intertwined when it comes to the South, and they don't really get separated. I wish that was not the case. I feel bad for my Southern brothers here, but when it just comes down to it is that y'all didn't learn the lessons from the Civil War, and we didn't clean house after that because we pardoned the South. So when it comes down to it, we never really fixed any of the issues. That's why we had Jim Crow after slavery ended. That's why we had a lot of these institutions that basically got rebuilt by the Dixiecrats. When it comes to where we are today, is that are we doing anything that's actually like making it better? No, not really, because we've seen the data on this one. I'll throw a bit of a monkey wrench into this conversation. When it comes to positions and policies, 60% of the Black community would actually support the Republican Party more than Democrats, but they vote 90% in favor of the Democrats. There is a real conversation to be had as to why that is.
I want to know exactly what specifically though is racist about this. Is it that it's like a special district, like for a different area?
They're asking based on our
How
Like,
dare
identity as
you?
white people in this small section, we want a different police force and a different judiciary branch.
I
That
mean,
is,
is there like
yeah.
anything leading up to this? Like, is this just like a happening in a vacuum?
So,
There
so
has to
Gibbs, let
be.
me spin it to you like this. So, if a large group of, say, Syrian refugees were to come to America and create a small insular neighborhood where they brought over like super, and I don't understand this isn't all Syrian refugees at all, but say they were of like super conservative Islamic faith, and they came over here and they wanted to set
Yeah,
up a
like
little
what
spot.
Somalians have? Is that what you like where they have a law and
So,
order?
like something akin to this. Do you
Say
think
that,
that
like,
like I'm basically playing on the conservatives love to like fearmonger about things like no-go zones, where populations of Muslim immigrants come over and set up areas where they're enacting their own sense of like justice or their own sense of like how like social mores and laws should be. That's essentially what's happening right here, but even worse because it's backed up by like a legal and a legitimate legal authority, which is the state and the city. This is far worse than like even the conservatives' worst fear of a no-go zone, because
The
now it's
legitimate
backed up by
authority.
nobody's
state
actually being
violence.
like told they can't come in here. It's not like they're saying this is a sundown town in the middle of Jackson, Mississippi.
Those
Like that's
racial
not what
lines.
anybody's doing. That just sounds like propaganda at
So
this point.
there's differences between de jure and de facto segregation. All right, one of them is done through law, where it says you can't move here. That's the Jim Crow Tiberius is talking about. It's like, hey, there's literally laws against you being able to move here, like sundown towns. And then there's the other type of segregation, which is it's cultural segregation. This is the white neighborhood. That is the black neighborhood. You go live with your kind. We go live over here with ours. And that is much harder to break, even in places like
And that's a good
Boston,
thing.
where no, it's not. Even in
Yes, it
places like
is.
Boston, which never had like slavery
It's
to the
not your
extent that anywhere in the
choice.
South did,
Yeah,
No,
why
there
would
is
the
you
slavery
live
it's still
right
by
one of the
now,
most
people
which
that
is what
segregated
you're
cities in the
doing. You're the
world.
slaver.
I don't understand why that's a bad thing to want to live by people that embrace similar values to you. Like, was that like when did it become bad to want to be around other people that have similar values?
They
I don't
come
understand.
to a
I
small
like
community that don't
Like
engage
Because
nobody's
with
sitting here,
values
nobody's
values
sitting there
protect
saying the police
communities.
are forcing you to live in the white ghetto in Jacksonville, Mississippi. No one's over here saying that people can't shop or work over here. That's not what's happening. They're mad that they got a police force. They're probably what happened is that this town has this area where it's being funded more. These guys like our tax dollars are going to stuff that's not helping us, and we're suffering. So they probably had to sit here and get the state to come in here and step in, and that's probably what's happening now. People are like we don't like it, like
even I
And
don't
I
think that's what's happening here, but even in your example given, a bunch of white people who like we know the economic class lines and how
A
they
racist
interplay with
term.
race. We know how the intersectionality works here. But if you have a majority white, and stop saying it's a racist term, if you have a majority white like district and then or a majority white like part of the city, and they look around and they go, I actually don't want to pay for the school systems that are like in the inner city. I don't want to pay for like the roads down there. I don't want to
the
pay for
whole
the
point
fire
of zip
department or the
codes.
police station over there. That is literally going to cut off the
Yeah, they don't
main
want to
source
be
of funding
enslaved by
for
you.
things that are funded by property value and property taxes that they actually need to like get better. You're literally saying, okay, we're going to take our money, we're going to cloister ourselves away in this little segregated neighborhood and keep that money inside of here, which is the
Yes.
opposite of how you develop economic freedom and economic
Well,
benefit.
but think about what you're
No,
saying.
you
Like,
don't
I
So
don't
wait,
want
wait,
my
wait.
you
tax
don't dare to
dollars.
use the word freedom after
Okay,
that.
real quick.
You're
So
not for freedom, you're for slavery. You're for the opposite of freedom. It's not
I mean,
your money.
think about what you're saying though.
That's not
Like,
how this
say,
works.
say I own a property, right, and I pay property tax. It goes to make sense that I would want my local property tax to go to support the industries and stuff that are like the like stuff around me in my near area, as opposed to hey, I'm gonna pay property tax and my property taxes go to the zip code 6 miles down the road. Like that doesn't make like and that's what you're advocating basically. That's dumb as hell.
You live in a community, brother. I'm sorry. You live in a society. It's literally Joker.
Well,
memes
it's
right
also
now.
it's a
No,
little
no,
more
you don't
it's
live in
a
a
I really
society.
wanna
okay,
it's
so
a little more complicated than that
I
because
go and then
you
Tiberius.
But it's not. It's not more
you
complicated.
you also have the fact that this is being done by the state. So the state is telling the city of Jackson how to subdivide like its judicial system when it should be the city of Jackson being able to decide that because that's the smaller unit. However, if a smaller unit within Jackson wants to have its own fights in order to like develop its own internal structure, like the boroughs of New York City have, it should have a chance to do that. But to have it imposed top down from the state, like that, that's a problem.
We can explain
I-
why
I-
it's a problem because
I-
you
I
have to
wanna
have
go
a
here
for a second,
conception of
please.
property that comes from autonomy,
Real
and that's
quick,
what you're
guys.
violating.
Real quick. So Tiberius next, and then we can go to Casimir, and then whoever else wants to go.
Yeah, so the ethical conversations around like the judiciality and also administrative differences between like one group of people and another, but more particularly just wherever you draw the lines is always weird. And it's always really hard, especially when you have not only like geographic differences, but you also have federalism, right? So what do you actually give to the feds? What do you give to the states? What do you give to your local government? These are always ethically a mess because at least from what we've seen is that you can have it to where it's like, hey, look, let's get together. We get our friends and our like-minded people, and we build a prosperous, thriving community, right? That in the idealized world, that's what you do, and that works very, very well. The problem is that we have seen time and time again where you do have communities that are formed not to not to basically create a greater whole, but to escape a greater negative or a perceived negative. It is to remove themselves from the intangibles or the untouchables that people do not want to go into. And the ethics always are a little weird here because on one side is that if you do believe that your community is dragging you down, you don't want to be a part of it. Should you have the right to leave? And I would say the general answer is yes. The question is that are you actively screwing over all the other people because are you not able to bring them up with you leaving? It's the whole basically. Do you want to pull the boat into a different harbor, or do you want to bring the boats in for a higher tide? Ethically, it's always a mess because if you're one of these guys that's just like, oh yeah, it's just one or the other, I don't think you understand ethics, and like you shouldn't be on this conversation.
You don't have
Casimir, and then I have a
any
question.
foundations to your ethics, and that's the problem. You think that you have responsibility, but responsibility only comes voluntarily. Otherwise, it's not responsibility. It is literally you telling people from a central authority, based on your false calculus, what to do. Actual communities are built voluntarily.
No,
The
this is
reason why-
bullshit.
the reason why the
Most communities
Amish
are built by
Mennonites are-
force in the
reason why the
use of
Amish
force.
Mennonites and the Mennonites are prosperous in the United States is because they're pacifists and they have to escape and they don't get to use the resources of others. So they try to disengage from our society as much as possible. They accept welfare when they're getting taxed because that's part of their money coming back to their community. But if they could avoid that, that's what they're doing. And some of them have to travel to the far reaches of the Amazon right now in order to achieve that life that they want. That is true. That is actual economic freedom, which is the freedom from the meddling of others, the freedom from this ability of others to dictate to you how your life should be spent. There's no such thing as money. There's no such thing as property. There's only your body and everything that flows from it. When somebody takes from you, what they're doing is they're taking your time spent on this planet. And this is inherently unethical. Now, you can convince somebody to offer charity and help.
As much as I find your rant engaging and raving, like if you want to go join the religious commune, go do it, sir. Like the reality. Yeah, like the reality here is that
you will come with guns to take it away.
Yes, we will.
You will come to Waco and kill children in mass.
Yes, we will. We will kill pedophiles. We like doing that. It's actually a pretty good thing to do.
Pedophilia there. You don't kill pedophiles in DC. You're fake.
Okay, so Gibbs is next, and then Degen, and then I have a question for the group.
While we've been going on, I did a little research because I was kind of curious what led up to this. So this is from 2020. This is right after the BLM riots. The Jackson Police Association points out that the Jackson Police Department is over 95% black and has no evidence of any kind of systemic racism throughout the department. Now, what's wrong with having more representation for a white neighborhood in the police force? Whenever we have a predominantly white representation in predominantly black areas, it's a problem. But now that they want some predominantly white police force in their area, that's reverse racism is running wild. I think it's boo-hoo. How dare them want the same thing that we have?
Degen?
So that's interesting. I would be very curious to see the stats on if they can actually find white cops who want to be white cops in Jackson and not somewhere else. So if the white community can actually, and I'd be pretty curious to find out, can field an entire office for their area of white cops that for some reason haven't applied to the other district, then I guess. But it just seems like those people don't exist anyways, because if they did, they'd be working in the police force as is. So I don't really think you're going to get a representative police force no matter what, bud.
So I'll split hairs here and say, like, obviously not every white person in Jackson is racist, right? And I would be a fool to say anything among the line. I would be a fool to say that, like, no one who is black in Jackson is racist, right? When it comes down to it, here is that it's weird because I don't think the conversation in the South is needing to be about, like, who's more racist, but actually addressing the fact that there's a lot of grudges and grievances that comes out of 400 years of history in the South, and they have done very, very little to address it or build common ground in any of this. And I think this actually may be a symbol of this, is that I'm totally with you where it's just like, hey, look, if people want to go out and do their own thing, largely you should let them do that. The problem is that are they actually avoiding a problem where they need to come together and build a greater community, or is it where, these people just can't get along and they don't want to work together? I can't answer that. I don't live there, but I do have cousins that live there, and the things that they say, oh my god, I want to puke a little bit. All right, so that's all I'll leave with that particular conversation.
Okay.
So I was actually maybe not in the same way, but I was going to, I guess, pose the question to the panel, kind of what Gibbs posed, which was, although this is more about the judges and the prosecutor staff, prosecutorial staff there, in Eastern Jackson that's going to be affected. Um, the the arguments that are being made by the people planning this and the suspected motivations are obviously very different. The arguments for why this is because of there's issues with the court waiting, wait time in order to get a trial. There's issues with civil matters. There's issues with chancery matters, and this is going to expedite things. This is going to be more efficient, just economically, judicially. This is what we got to do. But they presented limited evidence for this, and it is going to shift the racial makeup of the prosecutors there, the judges there. In that instead of being appointed or elected from Jackson, they're going to be appointed by the state, and the state of Mississippi is overwhelmingly white and is controlled by Republicans who statistically in the state of Mississippi tend to be white. So I guess my question is, how much do you buy the narrative here that it's actually due to efficiency reasons?
Even if that argument's true, Lactoid, it's dog shit. Because what is your argument now? Oh, we're going to create a separate judiciary system so that the white folks in this area have an expedited court process. That's
a good thing.
insane.
Everybody should have an
In
expedited court
theory,
system.
both people would get both groups would get expedited.
That's the idea, right? Is that instead of creating an entire separate court branch for this group of people over here, you would instead spend that money on expanding your already existing court branch, but the inefficiencies don't have to be there. But instead, you're arguing to create a whole separate system so that these white folks can have just a separate. It's basically like a fast lane at Disneyland, right? Like you get in this little side thing because you're from East Jackson, and that seems insane.
Did you explain to them what in modern parlance white means? Did you ask them whether they're white? Or you just bigotry just flowing out of you, calling them without even learning who they are?
It's not private language.
Are they Amish? Are they German? Are they Irish? Are they Pietist? Are they Catholic?
Those things call
who are they? What is their culture? They're white oppressors. I'm Greek and Portuguese, you can mock them and you can denigrate them. Listen, the way you adjudicate this is very simple. There's two injustices here. The state deciding for a city to do a certain thing that the city doesn't want to do, you can claim that it's an injustice because it's a bigger power, a centralized power controlling somebody more local. The problem is that local guy is also a criminal, and a criminal cannot claim ethical claims if they are performing the same crime against a subgroup within themselves. The person who's sending people to an isolation camp cannot then become, the holy pope and say, oh, you shouldn't do that in China. If you're doing that, if you're a hypocrite, if you're doing the same thing, you can't protest it. That's the issue. The issue is that the entire system of power is the corruption. Where we have this idea that if the majority votes for something, the minority should just suffer perpetually. And that's what we have in cities like New York City. The boroughs should be split up into smaller groups. Because right now, you can vote as hard as you want every single election and lose for 20 years straight in New York City and be commanded by people in a different borough, with a different economy, with a different culture. They're going to tell you in Brooklyn or in Staten Island how to live your life. Similarly, people in DC
Long
are
Island, a
commanding
culturally
people
different thing
in,
than,
in,
I don't
in
know, any
Alaska
borough.
how to mine their gold. That's the issue. The power is the issue.
So when you guys say culture, I mean that's kind of that was in the prompt as well. Is there something wrong about being ruled by a people of a different culture, right? Is there something wrong here? Because then there's going to be two arguments. The first argument is going to be from Jackson saying, well, the state's coming in and ruling us, and we're of a different culture than them, and then the locality might make the exact same argument. So how do we parse then between what to do? Because I mean, the line has to be drawn somewhere when we're talking about the court system. How small can we get here?
As voluntary as possible.
So my answer on this one is that my liberal sympathy is make it to where like having two cultures and like rule with one another, that's fine. There's nothing unethical about that. The problem is at least from what I can see throughout human history, is that humans hate this shit. There is a reason why Germany and Austria are not the same country, even though they literally are, by almost every definition, the same people. Americans and Canadians, same thing. Even the smaller cultural differences and values that perpetuate into the macro level seem to absolutely make us want to separate and tear out, which is again why we are having this conversation among a few people, and not remotely the majority, but the whole national divorce conversation. The culture just between the right and the left in American politics right now has gotten to the point where people don't want to rule each other or be involved with one another because they find them incompatible. I personally think that's bullshit, but there's a level where it's like, hey, look, it really offends people when if you are a Christian conservative and you've got some secular liberal douchebag telling you what to do. Go ahead, Aiko.
Yeah, I wanted to just say that I noticed the same thing. Like for instance, I lived in Italy for a year. I expected to hear, oh, Italians don't like the Swiss or something because they border each other. No, the village that I lived in, Duasante, they hated the next village down. Like it was like definitely like the division was happening at a much more sort of feathered level at over there.
But all of these, Aiko, aren't all of these high trust societies? So when you say hate, it doesn't mean that they actually went around and punched each other out. It's just like they were slightly more hostile for each other's influence, maybe like two sports teams. But in terms of general civility,
it was a lot of complaining. Yeah,
complaining, but you wouldn't be evicted from like a restaurant or.
Italy is
you're right. But Italy there were a lot of fights in the streets between people of either one of them. Like there was some punching happening too.
I'm going to give Gibbs a little bit of room to speak right now.
I mean, so you're saying the same thing. Okay, yeah. So you're talking about getting smaller. Well, that's great and all until you have a situation like Rwanda where you have the radio announcers telling people to take machetes to their neighbors. I mean, so yeah, it's great. Sometimes you need the bigger culture to come in and like step up, and say, hey, this is something's not working here. It's inefficient. And then I kind of want to talk about how the judicial versus like federal system is supposed to be designed, right? Like, whenever we do legislation, it's designed to be inefficient on purpose, right? We're supposed to have a longer time in legislation. When it comes to the judiciary, you're supposed to have as speedy as trial as possible. And if this is going to speed up the quality of life in the judiciary system, then this is overall a good thing for everybody involved. So I really don't understand how they can sit here and go, woe is me, whenever they're the one going to be benefiting from a faster judiciary.
For the people,
I'd like to see if the faster judiciary actually occurs out of all of them, and if that faster judiciary is on both sides of the divide.
If it's only on one side of the divide, but the other side doesn't necessarily slow down, would that still make it a problem, Aiko?
Yeah, absolutely it would. I mean, you can't Brown v. Board of Education at some point going to come into play here, where you expect people to have, relatively equal access to services that the courts say they have a constitutional right to, and education is one of those. And so, yeah, if you start getting a two-tiered system that gets too skewed, that's going to be a problem. And that's why I'd be very interested, if this happens, I'd be very interested in seeing the data that comes out of it. If the benefits that they're saying will happen on both sides actually occurs, that's going to matter.
Or are we going to get into separate but equal territory here? That's going to be the argument they make. It's separate but equal. They're literally going to do this all over again.
If the
that may come into play.
Benefits occurs, if there is a negative consequence for the people that lose access to some resources, if it's the more ethical position, meaning if it minimizes theft, if it minimizes actual oppression, if it minimizes actual centralization of power, then that's the good thing. It doesn't matter. You can't care about your desired consequences and then actually get them, because you get the exact opposite. You start trying to micromanage people, you start trying to control people, and that's where you get your inefficiencies, because you can't calculate what is known in a locality. What works in one locality doesn't work in another. And listen, I do prefer the fuzzy edges of society where people integrate. But I believe that it's unhealthy for us to try to integrate everybody. There should be places, there should be bars, there should be clubs where it quite explicitly tells you you are not welcome here. Russian, not welcome. Don't like you. We're Ukrainians. Have a hard time with Russians right now. And there should be a Russian club saying, if you speak Ukrainian, please don't come in. Now, the federal government came in and said that's illegal. What they did is they put all of that economy into the underground. It still happens, but it happens without the government knowing about it, without you knowing about it, because it's not public information anymore. So you go somewhere, you plan a trip, and you end up interacting with people that hate your guts, that don't want to talk to you. This happens when you, with a pale skin color, show up in a neighborhood that believes that you're hurting them. Even if that belief is delusional, it is not up to you to force them to have a better belief. If you want them to have a better belief, then work along the edges of these different groups, be the peacemaker, open up businesses that integrate people, and what this will promote is it will promote different cultures becoming less xenophobic towards each other. If they're allowed to take breaks from each other, then they will be a little bit less xenophobic, because they're not forced by a central planner to integrate.
All right. So real quick, Kaz, I'm going to take what you just said and actually ask a question to Tiberius and Aiko, because both of you said something earlier that I think I want to get your opinion on this, and then we'll start wrapping up. So Tiberius, I want to start with you. You had stated that it's just sort of a fact that people don't like being ruled by other cultures. And what Casimir just said seemed to indicate that he's okay with that. He's okay with having kind of exclusionary zones where only people within a certain culture can exist. However, this would seem to be antithetical to federal law and antithetical to what a lot of people believe is the idea of, the new America. I mean, if you're saying people don't like being ruled by other cultures so much, why is what Kaz is advocating for here wrong?
So, I got to split this into two, because this gets into assimilation versus like what other people call oppression, right? What we generally see with societies that are like hyper assimilative, which is like the United States and a few others, maybe Rome, is that you have a combination of people who kind of come here willingly because they're leaving something they really fucking hate, and then they get to participate in here, but they're not 100% on board, right? There is cultural like discrepancies that comes from their homeland versus here, but they generally find that they're happier here, they like it here more, and that whether it is them or their children, usually everyone kind of follows suit in the end, because largely it's more willing, which goes to what Kaz is saying, but it's kind of just the general modus operandi. You fit in with what you want to operate with, right? Where the other side of that particular equation goes is it's basically colonization. Is that instead of openly letting people come into you, you go to others. You tell them, it's like, hey, look, we have the superior moral values, we have the superior institutions, and you're going to do what we want. That's been a huge thing that has actually made cultures throughout history, right? This is how Rome literally made the Latinized world to a large degree. I'm not going to say either of them are openly right or wrong. They have some serious ethical conversations to it. We're largely now in a world where we openly despise colonialization and imperialism, but it's how we've operated for literally the last 5,000 years. So if you want to dispense with that, cool, but now you're going to have a lot more ethnic enclaves where everyone's going to disintegrate, because it's now just an open choice on if you want to integrate or not. What we generally see is that most people don't. The only times that they usually do is because they hate their own, basically where they came from or what culture they come from. if you go down that path, you're probably going to slow down assimilation, and you're going to slow down I'll put it this way, the cultural blender that we've seen throughout history. So is it wrong? Ethically, it's kind of gray. I don't want to just comment and say absolute good or absolute evil, because like literally this is kind of how you get modern Americans to a large degree. It is an amalgamation of both of these.
I was slightly misrepresented. I'll be
I
extremely
was going to
brief.
correct that. Yeah, go ahead.
So the misrepresentation is as such. I'm not, if you want this analogy, I'm not against love, right? I'm not anti-love. I'm pro-love between different communities. I'm against molestation. I think that integration can be good. Separation occasionally can be good. But what makes them ethical is when they're not done with force. If something is good and then you do it with force, you get the opposite result. You don't get what you want. And what we've seen is a backlash in society. We've tried really hard to integrate by force, and now our top academic institutions have a culture of open calls for segregation, where the founders of multiculturalism are like the Martin Luther King Jr. Those guys, even though they had slight segregationist tendencies, the level that it occurs right now, they're turning in their graves. I don't think they planned for anything of that level. They didn't plan to a complete return to segregation, even though they had a message of empowering local communities, right? We're supposed to have things like Black Wall Street. It was destroyed, very bad, very nasty, that people used power to suppress others. Should be rebuilt. It should be allowed to be rebuilt without meddling.
Okay, I'm going to let Tiberius respond. I also want to say, if I ever misrepresent anybody, this is going forward as well, anybody, let me know, and also feel free to just correct any kind of misrepresentation. I don't want to be that guy. So go ahead, Tiberius.
Yeah, part one is that I apologize if anyone feels like I misrepresented them. I try to be as good faith as I can, actually, and so if I said anything there, just want to make that clear. That was not the intention. The second thing here is that this is the part where I will disagree with you. Sorry, I can't remember your name. Kaz. Yeah. This is where I disagree with you. The ethics of force are weird. I'm not going to openly just say force is bad. Now we're not going to agree on this, and this is fine, right? Just people have different moral structures. I long accepted that the leftists will never be in my moral sphere. I'm just not going to be able to reach out to them, right? But when it comes down to it, though, is that I do think that there is a general good that the United States has provided, where we do allow a level of where, hey, like, come in, do your thing, and see if you like what happens. But there is also levels to where we do enforce the general rule. We do have our own rules of law. You can't murder people, which obviously is not really legal anywhere, right? But we do also have certain particular things that we do enforce, or at least used to far more enforce, that would kind of build out the American ethos. Pledge of Allegiance, anyone. Shit like that, kind of more is what I'm talking about, whether you call it hard or soft power. I will 100% agree with you as point 3 that multiculturalism is absolutely fucking asinine. I'm an assimilationist. I want people to largely be on the same page when it comes to their cultural issues. And if you don't want to be part of that culture, that's fine, but you need to go to somewhere where you can deal with that culture. So that's a whole split. But anyway, I'm pretty much done for the night unless something else is going on. So I'm not leaving. Just wanted to say, I think we're pretty much wrapping up.
Yeah, so as I was going to say as well, I'm going to go to Aiko. I want Aiko's answer to the question I posed about, if people don't like being ruled by other cultures, how would you prevent their preference for that here? And then I wanted to give Degen and Gibbs last opportunity just to make a final comment on this, and then we'll go into final closings. So go ahead, Aiko.
I think, historically, nations have been associated with ethnicities. Those have been highly overlapping concepts. And America came on the scene and sort of challenged that, maybe for the first time. Although I do take ties pointing out that the Roman Empire did, knit together many different ethnicities, but they did allow them to sort of keep their core identities at the same time. In the United States, I think we went a lot further than humans had ever done before. And someone said to me once, and I think this is true, that that the American experiment is goes against human nature to a large degree, and that we're always kind of sort of like forcing people through this like melting pot, this sort of blender that Ty talks about, and I think that is what helped create the American identity. But we do have these enclaves, and I'm in one right now. I'm in an enclave of recently arrived Chinese Americans, and they're like I'd say 90% of the students at this new academy that I'm at, and so I'm experiencing something very different than I've ever done before in my career. I'm dealing like with a like sort of a almost monocultural uh, uh, phenomenon. My students are mostly born in America, but their parents are not. They're from China, and so there's a sort of we're starting to call Koreatown in this part of Texas, but it's Chinese people that are in the enclave that I'm part of. But I see it more as a staging ground. So although it's this experience with Chinese Americans is new to me, I grew up dealing with the same phenomenon like with Mexicans in Texas, and I taught or I coached in a long time in districts that were about 70% Hispanic. And so what I see it is these enclaves more as a staging ground, where they sort of develop, but eventually they do wind up integrating, and they start integrating in this sort of voluntary way that Casimir is talking about. And I think we do have to have some room to allow, and I think there's some like real benefit to it. Like, who doesn't love going into like Little Italy or a Chinatown or some of these other areas where you can start to see like a sort of differentiation in culture, where it doesn't look the same in every city block in America from the West Coast to the East Coast. I do like retaining some of that individuality. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but I also think that it's a constantly changing, and for any given individual family that's involved, temporary phenomenon where they're transitioning from wherever they came from into whatever they're like into American culture. I think that there's a force there that cannot be stopped. Although I do agree with Casimir that it's sort of backed off in the last 50 years, where we're starting to see like more differentiation in some areas. I think because we're relying more and more on immigration in order to deal with the fact that we can't replace ourselves with birth anymore. And so like that's why the youngest generations, as you go from generation to generation, with each successive one, they're more diverse than the one that came before. And I think that makes it harder to sort of like put them in that blender that's going to turn them all into the same thing.
Okay, so here's how we're gonna do it. Degen, you can get one word in, and then Gibbs gets the final word on this topic, and then we'll have just final closings, and we'll wrap up. So go ahead, Degen.
So the couple things there. The idea that our system is like not designed to like, or is designed to go against human nature is something I kind of like fundamentally disagree with. I've read a lot of the original documents from Cato's letters, Machiavelli, the Federalist Papers. All of these things talk about human nature very in depth. And all of the founding fathers, when designing the Constitution, had read these sources, were debating these sources, talking about them at the Constitutional Convention, and basically trying to design a system, and failing to do so, honestly, trying to design a system that would incorporate as much human nature into it as possible and safeguard against the worst parts of it. And then I would go on to your point about Chinatown and Little Italy. Yeah, we all love going in there and getting a nice bite to eat, but let's not forget why those things were created in the first place, which was out of necessity. I mean, like the Italians were not accepted when they arrived here. They were facing a very like antagonistic society that they're trying to enter into. Was very against them ever entering any other sphere. So they had to make these enclaves. It was the only way they could survive. They had to be around each other Italians so they could speak the same language to each other. They wouldn't forget where they were from, and so they could have economic opportunities that they could give each other. This is literally like economic survival 101 for a society that is in a small little society, like a subgroup in a larger one that's trying to over dominate them. So while I can appreciate like, oh, it's nice to go get a little piece of that culture, I won't think it's worth like having such an antagonistic society that produces the need for those enclaves.
All right.
That's all I got.
All right. Now, Gibbs, final word on this, and then we can move to closings.
I think that it's I'm more along the lines kind of what Iko was saying with that it's more of a staging ground. I notice a lot, living in South Texas, the people come across the border, the first couple gens, they like live together. You have like the grandmother living in the house and the kids living there, and then the next kids that are on the way, and they kind of stick together and they build like little communities, and then as they get older, then the next generation will kind of like spread their wings and go like, go become like, the college students or go and like plant their like living somewhere else and send money back, or it kind of just it develops over time, like that based off my anecdotal experience, or when I've been to Houston or any kind of thing I've ever read, I kind of see that's how these like little areas build. But I don't think it's because it's antagonistic. Like that they need to do it. I think it's because familiarity is comfort, and also it's because they know how to work the social cues in that area. It could, like you mentioned, I think Kaz mentioned earlier that you might go somewhere and not know that these people actually hate you, or even if they don't hate you, you might have somebody out with malicious intent, versus hey, I can work and live in my like little area, and I'm able to understand the social cues that I grew up and is a societal norm for me. I think there's something good to be said for that, and I think it's a safe thing, and I don't think you're ever going to get rid of these little isolation things, even as we more globalize and go out. I think there's always going to be these areas that have some kind of ethnic influence. I think that's a good thing, especially when we go talk about things like space exploration and stuff. There'll be like little pieces at home that are like a little bit cultural identity that make things unique, and everybody likes to hold on to these uniqueness. But I do think over time, generally, especially with America at least, we've really got this national identity. There is a idea of what is an American, right? Now everybody's got different ideas of what it is to be American, but there are some like core concepts, that most people can agree on. And I think that it kind of, with the laws we put in place, with the overarching attitudes, it's really like it just kind of like changes the little individual communities over time into something more, like I don't know what's the word, homogeneous, where it's like all the same, basically, you know, with little tidbits of their own like culture sprinkled on top.
For sure. I would like to thank all of you for what I believe to be an incredibly entertaining panel. There was fireworks, there was serious conversation. I think we got some of the smartest people in the room, which I always personally love. And you guys entertained my legal topic, which for me it makes me happy always. So thank you guys for that. Thank you guys for everything that you've done here. And to the audience, thank you guys so much for sticking around and watching. This is the first Lactoid debate crate that we have put on. And with how this went, it won't be the last. I didn't know if this was going to go as well as it did, and if there was going to be another one. I would very much love to do another one, given how amazing this turned out. So, so that being said, if you guys want to see more content like this in the future, go ahead and click the follow button, and more stuff will come up on your feed. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on into just final closing statements. The participants here will be able to tell the audience where they can find them, or any kind of parting thoughts. And so for that, we're going to go ahead and start with Gibbs. Go ahead.
I guess to start, my name is Admiral Gibbs. You can find me, like I said, everything's Admiral Gibbs on all the socials. Like I said, if you have never checked out a Wicked Wednesday show, you should check it out. If you ever have a chance to watch out any of my announcing, you definitely want to see some of that. It's a kind of crazy thing. But yeah, other than that, that's pretty much where you can find me and whatnot. Final thoughts. Listen, time to teach China a lesson, boys. That's what we need to be doing. And if you don't have that opinion, then get that lip dick going. We got to get over there and give him a whooping. Otherwise, that's my final thought.
Yeah. All right, go ahead, DJ.
Like I said, don't have any socials to plug. If you want to come argue with me, you can find me floating around Destiny's Discord. Yeah, it's been a great time debating with all of you. Gibbs, I'll put you on the front line against the Chinese.
I think he'll take it. Iko,
Go off to Taiwan.
My final thought was that DGen's argument on enclaves and how they're like there for, that actually sounded a lot like what Casimir was saying, and I think what he was saying was that's their opportunity to sort of back off and like get a little sort of breathing space from the more dominant culture. I think that at least there's some overlap between what the two of them were saying, and I think there was some opportunity for agreement on this topic more generally, because we are sometimes more of a tossed salad than we are a melting pot. My name's Ika Rich. You can find me on Twitter at that same name.
Perfect. All right, Casimir.
Thank you. First of all, I have to say that despite some, appearances of harshness, I actually respect the person in the arena the most. Right, way above chat. Chat is just like really low, insignificant, nothing burgers. Whereas the person who shows up, shows their face, debates, engages with ideas, that's the man. And you can easily upgrade. It doesn't require much. Get a camera, practice, practice on our discords, and then come in and test yourself, test your ideas. At the same time, I also like educating on like a longer format, explaining where my ideas come from. I often talk one-on-one with people that are smarter than me on certain topics, and they course correct me when I go off or don't understand something or don't express it properly. And I'm willing to do that with people, particularly on weekend timelines. So my DMs are open on Twitter, Free Casimir. I'm available on various Discords. If I didn't explain something, I will explain it in as briefly as I can, and in private interactions. Thank you very much, and it was a great panel.
All right, thank you, Casimir. Now, Tiberius.
Well, I hope you all had fun this evening. I was quite impressed with this one, especially for a first timer. For a first round go, this was quite impressive. Definitely got a little heated, but I think we all kept it generally respectable. And so, pleasure to meet and be with each and every one of you. And of course, if I have seen you before, it's good to see you again. If anyone is interested in who I am, my name is Tiberius D, and you can check me out on Twitch and YouTube. That's largely what I do. Mostly geopolitics, a little bit of ethics here, a little bit of just kind of memery here and there. But if you guys want to, ask me anything, if you guys want to go down that particular road, whether you're in chat, whether you're on this panel, I can stick around for just a moment. But don't have a lot of time, so just quick in and out. But I will be doing a quick Q&A for the folks who are in chats, just to kind of ask me questions if you are interested. But I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. I was sick last week, and for some reason, I just lose it after about a minute. That's all I can speak. So anyway, thank you very much for having me, Lactoid. I hope we can actually, engage with each other at some point soon, because I love you. You need to be on my show on Saturday night. Saturday Night Lights is where it's at. And dude, I got some heavy hitters. What are you doing on Saturday night that just absolutely eats up your time?
There's a lot of plans that just tend to end up on a Saturday because the rest of the week is usually shot. So usually what happens. But I appreciate the kind words. I would love. I always love to talk to you, Tiberius. I love being a participant. As all of you know, I definitely like to get down in the ring as well. But being a moderator, you know what? I didn't know if I would love it or hate it. It's all right. It is okay to be able to, to get the questions that you want, answered by smart people, and to sort of be kind of hovering above the fight ring of it all. It's kind of a cool experience. So thank you all for giving me that experience, and the audience again, thank you guys for watching. Check out all of the people here. Talk to them, debate them. That's what we like to do here. Dialogue is everything. What we're going to do now, though, is we're going to go ahead and raid out, and we're going to raid out into my friend and perhaps what could be called Casimir Light, Fabian Liberty, with our friend Scott. So Scott and Mark. So we're going to go ahead and raid out to them. Like I said, thank you guys for tuning in.
Thank you for the audience.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Thank you. Great.
Thanks for the follow, Gibbs. Wanted to give you a shout out there.
No problem.
Hey, I have a legal topic for you, Lactoid.
Oh,
I'll be right.
One moment. We're about
I-
to. We got 7. We have 4 seconds.
wait.
3 seconds. 2 seconds. And
Gone.
all right, we're rated out.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I thought you had already.
No, you're good.
Yeah, I was interested. Here's what I'm interested in. because the Democrats just picked up, the Senate for another 2 years, which is unusual for a president at that point. But the Supreme Court is pretty clearly like locked in with conservatives right now. So I think what we're going to see is a filling in of seats at the appellate and district levels federally. And of course, they decide a far larger number of cases than the Supreme Court did. So there's some conversation, at least in academic debate circles, as to one of the arguments is that there's so many cases decided, especially at the appellate level. And a lot of people are thinking of the DC Circuit Court, but also all of the circuit courts, that there might be sort of an impending sort of the Supreme Court is going to have to only have a certain bandwidth of cases that it can take up. And at what, how does the Supreme, if there's a ideological schism between those courts, we know that the appellate courts are going to have to follow Supreme Court precedent, but we also know that there's only a certain amount of circuit splits that are going to make it to the Supreme Court. And so at what point, how do they balance out? That's what I want.
Lactoid, just as a notice, I still have you live on Twitch. Don't know if that's something going on, but just want to let you know.
So I'm live, but I'm pretty sure if you click on me, it goes over to Scott's. That's how the raid works, right?
It usually does, but for some reason I'm refreshing constantly, and I'm still I'm literally hearing myself right now. So,
okay, I'm gonna go ahead.
You should watch the replay when I asked Scott to do an Alex Jones intro to the raid, and he did. He's amazing at that.
So I
have an Alex Jones EDM song as my intro for.
Yeah, it is for me too. So I'm gonna try.
Well, I'm gonna bounce out.
I've ever seen. Yeah, you can bounce out. I'll answer your question.
Great talking to all of you.
I'm gonna try because Scott's viewers went up, didn't they?
I don't think everyone goes onto the raid at the same time, so it could be that it just haven't gotten cycled to you yet.
Either which way, you're still streaming, so I'd kill
You're
OBS.
still streaming.